What's up, everyone? Welcome to North America Show. Host Rob Knorr. Got a good one for you. Friday night. It's George, you driving. Be careful. Now listen, I know it's difficult to take your eyes off such a specimen, but you'll have to be content with the docile tones of my fantastic voice. Please, be careful when you're streaming or watching streaming and driving. It's great to be here. Had a day, man. Had a nice day. Hope you all did as well. Yeah, we got a great one tonight. Potentially criminal Sean's going to be our guest. Streamer, defense attorney, I believe out of Ohio. I'll be honest, haven't interacted with Sean in the past. Didn't know a lot about him. I've been watching his content this week, though. I'm very excited to talk to him. It's rare I get to talk to a lawyer on stream that's not a psychotic lefty. Lactoid's good, but it should be fun, man. I think he seems like a fun guy, too, so I hope it's loosey-goosey. When I talk to people, there's different types of talks you can have with people. There's debates you could have with them. There's interviews you could have. My plan is to have it be more informal. Now, if I'm talking to a congressperson or something of that nature, it's a little different. But with a conversation like this, I don't want it to just be like, here's the topics I want to get to. Hopefully Sean can add whatever he wants. We can talk about whatever he wants as well. I will say this. I am gung-ho to ask him about some of the lawfare against Trump, though. So hopefully he's cool with that. But we'll talk about whatever. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So he should be joining me about 8:15, 10 after 8. So it should be a lot of fun. It should be good. And then other than that, I had a busy day. For those of you who follow me regular, you know that I went to an orthopedics dude today for my back. And so talked to them and sort of got a plan going forward. It was nice to talk to a specialist. He seemed like a very cool guy. So me and my wife went in and talked to him, tried to come up with a plan together. And it looks like he agrees with me. Rob is gay. Thank you very much. I'm not gay. I'm happily married, heterosexual. But I don't know if it's... Do you mean that as a compliment, an insult? Am I well-groomed? Anywho, he agrees with me that he doesn't think surgery is the right option for me. So that was the important part. Also agrees with me trying to stay away from opioids and, severe painkillers are probably the way to go. So that's good. But he definitely notices the problem and said that it's a significant problem. It's pinching, my herniated disc is pinching a nerve. He had the technical terms for all of it or what have. So I am, looks like I'll be taking some injections. I'm going to go and we're going to try that once and see how that works. And then gave me some advice on sort of movements I could be doing at home that'll help me, hopefully make it better. Gay's happy. All right, yeah. It's all right, Miguel. I didn't take. Yeah, that was my day. It was fun. Got to spend some time with the wife. For me, it's like a lot of specialists and stuff like that because I live in a small town. You're talking 50-minute, hour drive before you can get to anything like that. So had some nice time talking to my wife in the car. She too is, there you go. Breaking news. Rob, 40-year-old balding man, overweight, happily married, bad back. Am I pro-Trump or pro-Harris? I am pro-Trump. My wife's very amused that my channels became the channel where 50% of my call-ins are giving me the business about my extreme belief that I think women should have the right to vote. So she gets a kick out of that. But what's up, Jim Beam? How you doing? So that's always fun. Now, I got to remember to keep checking my DMs here so I get notification when potentially criminal comes on. So remind me, once 8 o'clock hits, people in the chat remind me like, hey, Rob, don't forget to check your DMs. The dude's probably waiting for you. So, but no, I'm looking forward to this show. I think it'll be good. In other news, I did see that lawyer Pisco, however the fuck, I still don't know how to say his name. I feel like Pisco is an insult, like people are saying piss, but maybe that's how you say it. I don't know, whatever. He talked to Viva Fry today. I'm a big fan of Viva Fry. I only saw like 5 minutes of it, but I look forward to watching that at some point this weekend, and maybe I'll even comment on that. Destiny was on a debate in Modern Day Debates talking to someone named Kim Iverson, who I don't know. Only thing I know of that is he accused her of taking money from Russia, which maybe she is. I don't know shit about her. But it's funny. It's funny to, that's Destiny's go-to now. Yes, comrade. Massive Russian network. Spread influence of great Russian motherland country here. My wife's not a big fan of Trump, but I think she'll be voting for him just because she's not a big fan of the establishment as well. Super chat for Jordan Apocalypse Rising. $2. Thank you so much. Says Rob is a feminist. I guess so now. The feminists hate me. Now the anti-feminists hate me because I think women should vote. Roar89, thanks so much. $10 super chat. Did you see the more evidence came out today that Trump told the Pentagon to have people at the Capitol on January 6th? Yeah, hopefully it's one of the things I wanted to talk to my guest tonight about, potentially criminal Sean. Mark Milley's responsible for stopping the protection of the Capitol. Jeez, who's been talking about that for years when I'm debating? How many times have I debated January 6th? No, Trump never requested it. It was a rumor. It was unfounded. Oh, no, it was founded by the January 6th committee, who hid the evidence of that to spread a narrative. So, yeah, I think it's funny. Everyone's a Russian asset. The only other thing worth mentioning as far as X interactions, I will show you this. So one of my favorite people on X is Syrian's Bot, who is a fan of the channel. He's always generously clipping things that I say and putting them up there. So I thought it would be worth let's see if I can find it. Put a little clip together of I'll just show you what he said. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's good to see you all. I'll try to get as many people to vote as possible for Trump and Republicans. So he says, does printing money increase money supply? Pisco says yes. No, you still have to hand out the money, huh? What a moron. 5 alarm. Pisco gets schooled by Rob Norton economics. Stick to law. You've embarrassed yourself. Pisco says, you know, everything I said was true regarding the relationship of interest rates and MS. Go read an economic textbook. Stay in your lane. I say interest rates were lowered the other day after this debate. Does that mean that at that moment the money printers were turned on and more money was printed, which seems to be your claim? Cool. Can you tell us how much? And then he tells me to stay in my lane. What's my lane exactly? Isn't my lane embarrassing people like Pisco? Lowering interest rates increases the money supply. To decrease rates, by the way, they have an inverse relationship. Agreed? Agree you were wrong. Now, I'll show you this clip so you can hear exactly what was said, but it's important to give a little context here. Pisco's having this back and forth with Andrew Wilson for quite some time about what caused inflation, because Andrew says Federal Reserve policy, and then that morphs into lowering interest rates, and Pisco's got this gotcha of like, but Trump suggested lowering rates, therefore it's Trump's fault that there was inflation. Andrew's making a more general point, which is, look, the Fed policy of inflating the money supply, like 50% increase in the M2 money supply, caused inflation. And because the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency, if the currency that backs all other money is inflated by 50%, then that would cause inflation around the world. And the further you get away from the United States, it would have possibly more of an effect on. The Pisco's trying to make it about inflation's caused by this one specific thing, lowering interest rates. And that's not true. Lowering rates usually does have the effect of eventually increasing inflation, because what happens is it means more treasury bonds, more borrowing, etc., which means that the Fed's likely to print money. The printing money doesn't mean literally turning on the money printer, but creating more money on their balance sheets. But because Pisco is getting so technical about it, I was trying to make the point, and you'll hear what I'm trying to say here. I was trying to make the point that's technically not that as soon as you lower rates, that act itself creates money. That's not how it works. It's a process that normally leads to inflation, increased money supply. But what I was trying to say before Pisco interrupts me here is But I'll throw an olive branch out. I will blame Republicans and Trump. They did mass spending. They embraced lockdown, some of them. And those sort of things are what led to inflation. Unfortunately, Democrats do that stuff even worse. But there's room to criticize Trump. There's room to criticize Republicans. Absolutely. But you can see Pisco wants to hammer me like I'm wrong on some technicality. So the debate becomes this technicality. I'll leave you be the judge of what Pisco says. So here we go.
Inflation was lowering inflation, and what's brought us down to 2.5 inflation is the Federal Reserve raising interest rates.
That is a contributing factor.
Under Joe Biden, the Federal Reserve has had excellent policy raising interest rates to lower inflation. Under Donald Trump throughout his presidency, he was asking always to lower interest rates.
It is not.
Rob, you've been waiting, right? If I remember correctly?
Yes, I've been waiting. It's not just inflation isn't just about interest rates. Lowering interest rates itself, it doesn't create additional dollars. The problem is the policies that were largely that I am fully throwing an olive branch here. I said that the lowering, man, Pisco, I got to really speak slow for you. Let me. That is not economy. That is not economy 101. That is. Now, what I was trying to say, it's not just that causes inflation. That could have the result of causing inflation, but he's making it sound like, no, that's the end all be all. When you lower rates, you print money. And I'm like, no, there's the massive spending, etc. But if Pisco wants to talk about the technicalities of it, fine, I'll talk about the technicalities. So you hear here. No, it is not economy 101. I guess I'll have to explain this slowly for Pisco. Pisco, is your argument that the act of lowering interest rates simultaneously by de facto creates additional dollars?
Yes.
Yep, that is incorrect. What? Did you hear that? Is your argument that the act of lowering rates simultaneously and by de facto creates additional dollars? He says yes. That's wrong. Lowering rates isn't literally increasing the balance sheet of the Fed. That's not what it does. You could say lowering rates makes it more likely that people will borrow money. When more people are borrowing money, there's more money in circulation, which causes the Fed to print more money. But the actual simultaneous, what Pisco's saying here is simultaneously when you lower rates, that's simultaneously printing money. If that was the case, seeing as how the Fed just lowered rates the other day, that means that they literally added money to the Fed balance sheet at the exact same time. And that's not the truth. He's misunderstanding how that works, as you'll hear me say. What happens is there is no connection whatsoever from lowering rates to the creation of dollars. Those are two separate policies. Many times what happens is as follows. Interest rates are lowered, which means that people are more likely to borrow money. Then once people start borrowing money, the Fed will decide that, oh, now that there's more money in circulation, we need more money. Therefore, they create more dollars. So you are fundamentally incorrect in what you're saying. The reason that inflation occurred and that dollars were being printed was because Republicans, including Trump, supported disastrous lockdown policies under COVID. And you can criticize Trump for that, and he should be criticized. Unfortunately for you all, the Democrats and people like Harris and Biden wanted to do it way worse. So that's basically the argument. And unfortunately, Pisco, I'm not going to go through the whole thread, but basically his argument becomes, well, when you lower rates, it means more people borrow, and therefore it causes inflation. Right. That's my argument. That's the argument I made. Pisco's basically saying, he's just repeating my argument and going, Rob, you're stupid. Stay in your lane. Of course, lowering rates causes inflation because it means that more people are borrowing money, which means the Fed creates more money. Right. That's the argument I made. But the actual act of lowering rate, for example, if the Fed lowered rates and for whatever reason there was no more borrowing and no more money that was on their sheet currently went into circulation, it wouldn't lead to the creation of more money. It just so happens that when you lower rates, what usually tends to happen is more people borrow. Then the Fed will decide to add to their balance sheet. Even fractional reserve lending, because people were saying this in response to me, but fractional reserve lending only increases the money supply of a bank when the loan is issued. So, for example, if my local bank here decides for whatever reason, for those that don't know, fractional reserve banking means that a bank's able to lend out more money than they actually physically have. So they actually create money on their balance sheet when they give loans out. But that money is not created on their balance sheet until they give the loan. So if the local bank says, we're going to lend money out at an interest rate, all of a sudden we're changing our rate to 0.00001. Somehow they were able to do that. That itself doesn't create more balance on the asset sheet for the bank. It's only once the loans start getting lent out. That's it. That's what. So creating a policy that makes it more likely to lend out money or more likely for money to be borrowed, you can say usually has the long-term effect of causing the money supply to increase, but it doesn't de facto simultaneously create the money, which is what my argument is. Not a debate, more of a conversation or interview. I think potentially Criminal Sean agrees with me more than disagrees. Thank you, Ticky Tack Man, gifting 10 memberships. What a Chad, man. Awesome. So, anyways, and it's so funny, like, even people in the comments are agreeing with me. Like this guy. This guy's going to agree with my interpretation, but then say Rob's wrong, Piscos right. He says, I think what Rob's failing to grasp is that lowering interest rates do not physically create more dollar bills. And then he gets a laugh face. Can the Fed ever lower interest rates without issuing more banknotes later? They wouldn't technically have to, but it would go against their mandate, no? Well, right. You're making my argument. Pisco's the one who's saying that lowering rates is the act of creating money simultaneously. And the only reason that I came up was that this came up in this debate was because Pisco, no, you're wrong. What? You're wrong. Because what he's trying to do, he's having an argument with Andrew Wilson. Him and Andrew Wilson can have their own argument. But what he's trying to do is make this hyper-specific argument about lowering rates is what causes inflation. And my argument's like, that's a cause. But for me, what caused the mass amounts of this inflation were the lockdowns and then the massive spending that were a result of that. You contracted the economy and then forced spending to try to make up for it, which caused inflation. So now we have supply chain issues, inflation, etc. That's my point. That's the only reason that I don't really give a shit. In general, I'm agreeing, yeah, usually lowering rates causes money to be printed, which can cause inflation. I don't disagree with that. You could even hear me say in that clip, like, let me throw an olive branch. And then I even say, of course you could blame Trump and the Republicans that signed off on these spending bills. But the Democrats wanted to do it worse. But anyone who watched me in real time knows I was complaining about those massive spending bills. I was complaining about the lockdowns, etc. Right? It's just that Pisco gets so hyper-focused on interrupting you. No, you're wrong. He doesn't even bother to listen to what you're saying. So I was just making a technical point. Like, if he's talking technically, what does lowering rates do? It doesn't technically create money. That's not what it does. It is a policy that makes it more likely that the Fed will, in the future, create more money. And yes, usually that is something that leads to inflationary pressures. But there's also other things that lead to that. It's not just lowering of rates, which is why we saw inflation during the Biden administration, even as rates were rising. Anyways, that was it. That was a big argument. But I thought it was funny. And the other thing that's funny about this whole conversation, which I absolutely thought this was hilarious, was like, Pisco pinned this? I thought it was, maybe not anymore. It was his pinned tweet for the day? And I just think it's like a big L. I don't know why he would tweet that. Like, oh, stay in your lane, Rob. Like, what? Check my DMs. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Still no DM? Okay, thank you. Remind me and I'll keep checking here. Thank you, Crisco. I appreciate it. So, I don't know. I just thought it was funny. I was like, okay. But I do look forward to looking. Now, I gotta give Pisco credit though. A big get for him to get on Viva Fry show today. I like Viva Fry. I have no comment on how well Pisco did or how well Viva Fry did. I've only watched like 5 minutes. So I have to reserve my judgment. But as someone who doesn't hate Pisco and wishes him well, good for him getting on a show like Viva Fry. That's more reach for him, more eyeballs on him. Maybe he did very well. Maybe he did terrible. I don't know. I really don't. But that's an achievement, man, to get on some bigger people like that. So today I'll be talking to a lawyer, a defense attorney named potentially criminal Sean, and what we tentatively talked about was the lawfare cases against Trump, but I think we're going to branch out to, I think he's a Trump supporter, so maybe we'll talk about the assassination attempt, leaks, there's more leaks that are coming out of the Supreme Court. You know, I'll explain this to him, but it's like oftentimes I pigeonhole people in my head. So I'm like, oh, I'm talking to a lawyer. So all the things we have to talk about are related to lawfare. No. So certainly it's his show as well. I don't know if he's live streaming, but he's certainly welcome to talk about whatever he wants. And I hope that it's not a formal me interviewing him. It's more of an informal back and forth. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, everyone in my audience says Sean's great. I agree. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully it's, we'll be able to talk again in the future as things come up. But it's always nice to have a lawyer because, even as I'm pretty well versed in a lot of these lawfare cases, I'm doing so from the stance of a layman. And as a layman, sometimes it's easy to get in over your head with legalese, specific legal terms, specific writing of specific laws, things of that nature. So even if I'm directionally correct, oftentimes it's nice to have someone who's more well-read in sort of the process be able to explain exactly what's going on. He's a threat to democracy, threat to women's rights, right. Whatever the course du jour is, yeah. So, now, let me show you a little how the sausage is made here in the background. This was all set up thanks to my great editor, Black Elk, who is great. Thank you so much, Black Elk. He goes above and beyond. He's a great guy. Shout out to my friend, Black Elk. He edits all of my videos. He does the thumbnails. He constantly is working his ass off and just super polite to me, and I can constantly screw him over. For example, he asked me like 3 weeks ago, can you send me some pictures of just you making different facial expressions that'll help with thumbnails? I said, sure, I'll do it tomorrow. And I totally forgot until today. I was rereading some of my conversations with him, was like, shit, I forgot to do that. So he set this up, and I'm really bad at once the initial offers accepted of like what I'm supposed to say. So I reach out to Sean like, hey, Sean, what's up? Add me on Discord. How long do you got? How long do you want to talk? Are these topics okay? Like, because I don't know. I don't know what the process is to really do that because I'm very informal here. So, what's the expectation? Sean's like, sure, I'll come on and talk to this Rob guy. An hour? A half hour? 2 hours? 4 hours? You know what I mean? So I'm trying to get a feel like, how long do you got? And I don't want to throw it's like negotiating a price. Like some guy's got a car in the yard and he's like, how much will you give me for it? You don't want to insult him. You want to be like $3,000. And he's like, $3,000? I'm looking for at least 20 grand. Then you've insulted him. So I don't want to be like, hey, I was thinking maybe around an hour, and him be like, oh, I thought it was going to be like 20 minutes. And then be like, oh, shit, yeah, that's fine. Or be like, I was thinking around an hour, and he's like, oh, I thought usually you talk to people for like 2 hours. I'm not good enough for 2 hours. And then you'd be like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I just didn't know. I didn't want to take too much of your time. So hopefully it works out. I agree. I think he seems laid back. I don't think it'll be a big deal. But I tried to tell him in my message, I'm like, hey, man, I'm prone to just rambling on and on. So if you got something to do and you're like, hey, let's try to wrap this up, just let me know, man. No hard feelings, obviously. So, I'll get Black Elk. I'm sure Black Elk, if he's not watching this live, he'll be watching it later tonight when he's editing, and he'll be like, yeah, Rob needs to send me that shit. So, get him to do a Stonies read. Okay, I'll try that. Remind me. He lied about Rakita Law. We can bring up Rakita, but I know next to nothing about that situation. Rob, what's my honest opinion? What's the bigger issue in America, women's rights or the state of economy? Well, it's an interesting question. Right now, clearly the economy. The economy is women's rights, right? In a world where people can't afford to eat, that means that women suffer. It also means that things that traditionally affect women, such as domestic violence, illness, malnourishment, all of those things increase. So the women's rights issue is the right to murder babies anytime they want. I don't think that's a big women's right. Now, if we lived in a society where women are being chained up and not allowed to leave the homes without their husbands and forced to wear burqas and this, that, and the other, maybe the calculation's different. But Keep checking my DMs here. Just making sure. But yeah, I am looking forward to... So the consensus of my biased audience, and I don't say bias is a bad thing, we're all biased, is that Viva Fry did very good. Thank you, Pole NP. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for the follow. The consensus is that Viva Fry did very well against Pisco. That's what people were telling me. Hello, Pole. Sounds based, yeah. Ask him his big trains. Favorite trains, okay. Yeah, I'll be interested to watch that Viva Fry. That's fine, Paul. Don't worry about your English. Super chat from the Cut 03. Thanks so much. $5. At what point can we actually get in trouble for slander or something? All they do is call Trump racist, Hitler, etc. with no proof. We can ask what the specific laws on libel and slander are. My understanding is it has to be something actionable. So like public figures, the standards are much higher, right? So if you say Trump's a racist, I don't think that any court would reasonably say that that's libel or slander because you have a First Amendment right to criticize public figures. If you say this person molested this individual, that's different. Now you're making a specific claim of criminality. And so I think that would, if you don't have proof of that, that would fall into libelous or slander. But yeah. Garrett Link for $5. Where are you on the Kyle Kalinske debate? Really want to see you push him around in a debate. No response. I've messaged him in several ways. Have not received a response. Thank you for the donation, though. Okay. All right, so I'm going to lose you're going to lose my camera here for a minute. And then we're going to do this. Boop, boop, boop. All right. Hello, sir. I should have made sure my mic and camera are working. I think so. What's happening? Can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you. Sometimes Discord settings are... No problem.
All right, how about that?
There we are.
Yeah, I got it on my push to talk mode for Discord, so I can hear you.
Thank you so much for joining me. It'll be very informal. I'm already streaming and everything, but yeah, I know. I was just telling my audience, I'm like, I'm so bad. Like when, like, hey, you can stream with Sean. It's like, oh, that's great. And then I'm walking on eggshells because I don't want to like say anything. Like, hey, I was expecting you for a half an hour, and you'd be like, what? I'm only good for a half hour, or you'd be like, oh, actually, I only had 15 minutes. So it'll be super informal.
Sure.
I can, if you don't mind, if I could introduce you, and then you could say a little about yourself if you want. So this is fellow streamer, someone that I was just introduced to this week, and I've enjoyed watching so many of your videos this week. Potentially Criminal Sean, and you stream primarily to YouTube, I believe, right? And I'm defense attorney. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm a defense attorney. I'm licensed in Ohio. I practice criminal defense work, but I run a general practice, so I do all the other stuff. It's just the criminal law is, I think, the most fun. So
I considered going to law. So I was a debater in college, so I considered going to law school. My roommate went, and then he went. See, I always growing up, for me, law was like
the smart one.
Yes, so Perry Mason, right, or like Matlock, or something. That was law to me, like, or Law and Order. And then my friend, he went through law school, and then he was doing like the most. He explained it to me. He was working for like IBM as a lawyer, and he's like, it is the most mind-numbing, boring stuff. There's no exciting like Ace Attorney like objection like that. He's having these fun moments. So, but he's making a pile of money. So,
well, yeah, that's the change of that there.
So I I'm happy to talk about all sorts of issues, and by all means, bring up anything you want. But I'll start off by saying this. As someone who thinks that corruption's the big issue that I focus on, and one of the points of the spear of that is lawfare that the establishment uses against people that they find to be undesirable. I sort of look at lawyers as like wizards, and so I'm going to assume that you know the answer to everything, and clearly we all understand that's not the case. Yeah. So when I ask you, like, well, why does this happen? And you're like, yeah, dude, I don't know everything. Like, understand that's because I think you're magical and have the answers to everything.
Lawyers do have a magical answer. Sometimes maybe, and it depends.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I thought a good place to start was I talk to this left-wing lawyer, Pisco, all the time, and I've probably done hundreds of hours on discussions with him on issues of corruption. Before we get into specific sort of lawfare cases, I wanted to get your opinion on this. What I find is when I show a double standard in such as how the DOJ operates and goes after people connected to Trump or people connected to his opponents, whether it be the Biden family, whether it be Hillary and her associates, whether, any of those people, oftentimes at the end of the debate, he will default to, but that's because of prosecutorial discretion. And so when you could point out these discrepancies, it still falls within the scope of potential legal behavior from the DOJ, because at the end of the day, they ultimately get to decide there could be crimes we choose not to prosecute. There could be crimes that we choose to go more aggressively after. So my question to you is, do you, who is looking at a lot of these cases, as I know that you have, do you see a problem with, although it might be within the framework of what the DOJ is allowed, that they are sort of abusing that prosecutorial discretion to specifically target people that they find to be undesirable?
I mean, yes, I don't like the idea that they might be picking and choosing who they go after, but them's are the breaks. I mean, the idea we having prosecutorial discretion, that is the trade-off. That they do have that ability to pick and choose and decide, okay, not only do they pick and choose, but then pick and choose how they decide to prosecute that person and then what they're looking for. So yes, is that prevalent, especially at the federal level? Sure. But you also, I mean, you'll see prosecutorial discretion even in a criminal case. Well, this guy, like, hey, Guy C did a lot of stuff too. Yeah, well, we're not prosecuting. Why? Because we don't want to. Now, sometimes it's because, Guy C's running a gossip column to the police. But a lot of times it's just they don't feel like prosecuting that person. Or they don't think it rises to that level of culpability they want to get involved. So it does happen, but this is, and to be fair, this has been the nature of the beast for a really long time. And I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Clear and Present Danger.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that part where the CIA guy's like, I got my get out of jail free card. Do you? This is a very, this is how the game is played at that level. It goes back and forth, and for the longest time it was fairly mundane as far as the weaponization went. But yeah, certainly it's ratcheted up, but that's the political environment we're in now. Everything gets turned up to 11 at this point. So,
and it's like, I could see the purpose for it, right? Because we don't want to live in a society where it's like, where the DOJ or any sort of prosecution's acting like a robot that's like, technically, do you meet the definition of breaking law? Then we go after you the same. Because sometimes we understand, well, there's extenuating circumstance, and even though this technically is illegal, or we have people cooperating and things like you're saying there. But I think what's frustrating to someone like me is that I'm not asking you to agree with me, but my stance is I think that the FBI and a lot of these agencies don't like Trump because they view him as a threat to their sort of hegemony that they've had with like all of their buddies that have been in charge for so long. And so if they are the ones who get to use their discretion and they're doing so for political reasons, basically to benefit themselves, it becomes very difficult then for a layman like me to sort of point out all of the problems with the double standard. So the easiest example I could give is like the IG report that was looking at the difference between, or that was looking at Crossfire Hurricane, which was the investigation into Trump, and then looking at the midterm exam, which was, or the mid-year exam, which was the investigation into Hillary. It's almost as if I'm reading between the lines. So maybe I'm wrong. You could tell me if you think I'm wrong, but it's almost like IG Horowitz is saying like, yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on here, but he's looking at each individual action in a vacuum. And he's like, technically, this one action that the FBI took, is it within their bounds? Technically, yes. And so what that does is it doesn't really paint the picture of, but every single time they could benefit Hillary and her team, they took the action that benefited them. And every single time it was going after Trump, they went as aggressively as possible. And obviously, I'm being hyperbolic, not every time, but the vast majority. Yeah. And so, because of this idea of, well, there is discretion, it seems to me that it's difficult to explain to the American people, like, but there's something more going on here. That discretion shouldn't always go one way for one side of the ledger and always go the other way.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since I've read both those, the report breaking up both those. But you do run into that issue of, especially at the top of the FBI, you had a lot of very partisan people, especially with the counterintelligence division, especially with you had a lot of people wanting to make things go one way. Don't worry, we have an insurance policy.
Right.
Things like that. And certainly, yes, it's very hard, but the one thing I will say about the FBI, it's like, they've been corrupt forever.
Right.
Like, Hoover started the FBI because he saw the Cheka running around the Soviet Union going, I want that.
He was sitting around in a dress yeah.
Yes, well, the FBI spent the 30s and the 40s acquiring a blackmail empire. Mm-hmm. They were, Hoover had, that's why he was untouchable. He had dirt on everyone. The FBI surveilled the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. You get into the 60s, they ran COINTELPRO. They sent death threats to Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. Like, you get into the 70s, like PatCon. You get into the 90s, you have Raco and Ruby Ridge. Like, no, the FBI has been very horribly corrupt for a very long time. Now, it just happens to be that people who are left-leaning have made their way to the top, and that's just the way it's worked out so far. But I think I would say the FBI issue is just a really hard issue because people on the right tend to, back the blue no matter what. And it's like, well, you're backing the blue and that blue line is beating you over the head. But once again, in law enforcement, though, you see it at the local level. Mm-hmm. How many times do the cops investigate cells? They find they've done nothing wrong. So it's, like I said, it's not only the FBI, and there is a lot of corruption. It's just, people want to find people look for the corruption where they want to find the corruption or where they think it should be and don't really care where it comes from else. Mm-hmm. And that's really more of a, because I say this on my thing all the time, we're all hypocrites at the end of the day in some form or another. We all, well, what about this? It's like, well, it's like the meme goes, I don't care about that. I care about this.
Right.
So.
No, it's absolutely true. And there is a valid criticism. It's easy when you see you or people that you affiliate with that are being targeted to all of a sudden have a problem with it. One of the things I talk about a lot is, as someone who is sort of a Ron Paul libertarian, I was furious with the Patriot Act. And I spoke up, even though I didn't have a channel or anything, but I thought that some of the treatment of some Muslim Americans was appalling, right? That they were basically like, sort of like a lot of what we saw with the Gretchen Whitmer case, where they were going in. There are cases where they went in with people with like disabilities who happen to be Muslim and sent these honeypots in to like convince them to do things. And it would be people that you would look at and say, oh, that's someone who probably special needs that probably would have to be tucked. And a lot of right wingers didn't care. A lot of them were like, well, screw that. We're going to get our pound of flesh because of 9/11 and we blame Muslim terrorists. And so whatever, it's not affecting me. The Patriot Act, I'm a law abiding citizen. Patriot Act doesn't affect me. And it is, so I do understand that there's a valid criticism to be had. It's like, oh, well, you like Donald Trump, so you're upset now because the FBI's gone after him, but you didn't say anything in the past. So I agree with that. I just think that it's one of the frustrations. Obviously, there's a level of, if they're putting their thumb on the scale of our politics, that's very bad. But for me personally, who tries to debate many people on this, one of the things that happens is, if it's true that the FBI is biased, which will, just for the sake of argument, we'll say it is, it's difficult then to find evidence that proves the double standard, because the very entity that would be looking for that evidence is itself biased. And so you end up with situations like this. I'll say, hey, if we say that mishandling classified information is a crime, so be it. It should just be an equal standard. So you want to go after Trump? Fine. Hillary's team knowingly deleted subpoenaed evidence. They know it. They have them dead to rights. And instead of charging anyone, they gave everyone immunity. And then when I bring this up, this is what a left-winger will say. Well, did Hillary order that? And I'll be like, well, we don't know, because they gave immunity and didn't investigate it. So how would I have that evidence?
That's when you put Huma on the stand and say, hi, Huma, or whoever was smashing the phones with hammers. Okay, cool. You've got an evidence tampering charge. You've got an obstruction charge. Tell us what you want, and tell us what we want to know. Okay, saying, oh, I did it all myself. Fine, then you guys can go to prison for 50 years.
And I say this all the time. The left understands this. And by the way, it's not just a left-right issue. I'm just using the left as sort of the generality. They understand this because when it comes to Trump, anyone around Trump that gets charged, they're super giddy because they're like, oh, that guy might flip on Trump. Like his hand, the guy that worked at Mar-a-Lago that's been charged with mishandling.
Nada.
Nada, right? Like as soon as they went after Nada, everyone was like, he's going to sing like a bird. They're going to twist the screws. Heck, just some normal dude like me that watches Law and Order. Like any legal drama or cop movie, it's always the same. Let's get the low-level drug dealer. We could prove he committed a crime. We'll turn the screws on him, and he'll sing about the guy that's at the top of the food chain. But for some reason, with the Hillary investigation, it was the exact opposite. It was like, all right, we give you total immunity, Paul Combetta. Now tell us, who ordered you to destroy the evidence? Oh, I did it all myself. Well, rats, I guess that's the end of our investigation. It's so silly. It's like, but wait a minute. Of course, with prosecutorial discretion, this is within their rights to do. But doesn't that come across as like, well, how could we on one hand say, we gave people immunity, it's not that big of a deal, these charges. And then the FBI spend all of this time going after anyone connected to Trump, like mishandling classified documents. Oh my goodness, this is a serious crime.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, like I said, if you do, whether or not that's truly the case or you feel that way, there's not a real good way to resolve that question other than, it's still, America's legal system is garbage in a lot of ways. It's still the only legal system I ever want to deal with.
Sure.
And that's all I have for an answer is there's really any way you want to fix it is not going to be you will not like what the cure looks like 10 years from now. And I think just, for example, like we've seen with, just overall, like you said, the Patriot Act. I mean, I'm 39, so I was 16 when September 11th happened. And I remember the Patriot Act went through. And then I remember in the college, you learn about, like, hey, what's this NDAA thing? And then you learn about, like, where we're at today now, where, it just comes down to you're like, wait, the president drone strikes some guy and his kids?
Yeah.
Out in Yemen? And then we learned, well, wait, it wasn't just his one kid. We drone striked his other kid, too. Oops.
Yeah.
Like a year later. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Some of the specific cases about Trump, so obviously my big, as a layman, and like, I'm not going to belabor the point, this is the last I'll say, as a layman to me, sure. Oftentimes what I find myself saying is like, look, these are difficult questions. And like you said, oftentimes the consequence of radically changing something in the future can have negative repercussions that are worse that you don't even think through. So like, for example, when it comes to questions of how important are FARA laws, failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, I'm open to hearing two people that are more involved in that explain both sides of that. But what I default to is like, well, if we're going to take it seriously, then take it seriously across the board, right? And so if we're like, that's all I could ask for as someone who's not practicing law, it's not heavily involved. It's like, we just an unequal application of the law is always bad, but when it's being done to affect politics, I think that there are secondary problems. So given that, when I look at some of these specific cases against Trump, like we'll take one, the Letitia James tax case against Trump, it seems to me that what he's accused of doing, I try to muddle through the specific case and give my best interpretation of it. But the overarching point that I'm making is it seems like an awful lot of people have done almost exactly what he's done, and they're never charged. And you've even heard people like the guy from Shark Tank who is kind of saying, look, I'm afraid to even do business in New York anymore. This is how real estate's done. Is that something you see that you think this was something that's rarely charged? Or is there like better arguments, or maybe you think that Trump should have been found civilly liable for this?
I mean, I think in New York, especially, not only the tax case with Judge Engeron, but also the case right now with the documents, the falsified records issue. They're rarely done, but also especially like in the documents case, not the Florida documents case. That's the New York documents case.
Correct. The Alvin Bragg case.
This has become it's more of a. I don't want to say it's a novel theory, but it's a very out there theory. It's supported by the law, but this is where we get to the issue of, is this really what we meant for the law to be? Is this really how the law should be prosecuted? And I think the issue with the taxes as well, yes, they've used what's available, and I think they are truly stretching it and not doing it the way it's done, but they can say, and this is one of the cop-outs, and I think of one of the problems with laws. You could say, well, the law says we can do it, therefore we can do it, which is a very scary notion that, well, it's printed in the book, and it says that, like, hey, the law book says I can do it up there, so I can do it. And that's your only enabling idea, not that this is wrong or here's the harm it caused. It's just the book says I can do it. The magic, it's like you said, a wizard thing, a spell thing.
Right.
The spell book says you can do this. That is not the way you should generally be. That is not the way you should generally be, if you were the state, especially. Now, if you're out doing things and suing people civilly, whatever, that's a whole different world.
Right.
But when you're the state, you wield the amount of power you wield as a prosecutor. And I worked as a assistant prosecutor for 2.5 years, and I worked for a little while in a very rural area. The amount of power you wield is staggering, even when it comes to handling people in a county of 40,000 people, much less being Alvin Bragg, being the prosecutor for Manhattan Island, or even being Letitia James. I mean, obviously they have more and more power, but just a small town prosecutor has immense power. And I think if you're pushing for a novel theory, there's more than enough laws to really support what you're doing for the most part. If you're pushing for a novel theory or something new, I think that just shows you probably don't have what you really need, or it's not really something you should be doing.
And this seems counterintuitive to me saying, like, obviously the law should be equally applied. But I think practically, I'll be interested if you agree with this, at some point, even though it's like, yeah, the law needs to be equally applied, but we know nothing's ever totally equal, right? For example, people with have more money for a defense are always going to have a better defense. I would think that even though you like to think of the system as equally applying to everyone, when you're talking about going after the leading candidate for president or the former president or high-profile politicians, particularly if you are a prosecutor from the opposite party, it almost seems like it should be a tight buttoned-up case. Like, look, there should be no doubt. We shouldn't be trying theories that are novel or that are rarely used. It seems to me that makes it even more egregious because even if it can go by the book, when we have such a crisis of confidence in certain institutions in this country, it seems really damaging to be like, well, we're going to go out of our way to charge this dude with 37 felonies and with sort of a new theory that hasn't been used that much, knowing that half the country is going to be like, this is ridiculous. It just seems like what are they getting out of it? Is going after this guy really worth, even if you think that it's an acceptable legal theory, is it worth the loss of credibility for so many people because they think that it's political?
Well, I would argue, depending on your mindset and depending on where you are, yes, it could be a political goal. Because now he can go to the election saying, well, 34 election felon, he's a felon. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, great. Now, will this survive on an appeal? I mean, to be fair, and here's for everybody out there, very likely it will survive on an appeal because appeals, you're already behind the 8 ball. It's like the NFL. You're challenging the play. Appeals courts have a very... the appeals courts are, there are 3 branches of government. And the judiciary is one of those branches. And all those branches meet together as part of the tree. A tree does not attack itself, generally speaking. So, the branch A is never going to say branch B is bad, generally speaking. It's going to uphold it. But yes, I mean, does this help secure a political narrative? Sure. I think it's very much... I know... It's funny because Harry Reid was the only person who's ever said the quiet part out loud when they've made up a lie. The left and right have made lies before, but about the whole Mitt Romney thing, and he said, well, it worked, didn't it? Yeah, well, he's like, well, it worked, didn't it? It's like... Yeah,
it's almost refreshing to hear that, though, right? It's like, because we all know it, so yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for admitting, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. To go to your point about, even local prosecutors, obviously this isn't, I'll tell you a little story about me. This isn't a prosecutor, but the police. I was at a concert once in Pittsburgh, and I got drunk. I was way too drunk. They shouldn't have been serving me. But there's a big brawl. Like, it was a metal show, so a bunch of people started fighting. So I go up to the bar. I wasn't involved in that. Order a drink. It's like $10 for a can of PBR. They crack the beer, take my money, and before they hand it to me, the bouncer grabs it and goes, "You're shut off." And I'm like, all right, I want my money back. I didn't even touch the beer. You can't sell it to me and not give it to me. And he starts mother effing me. I mother eff him. Next thing I know, a cop throws me on the ground, slams me on the ground. My nose is bleeding, handcuffs me, takes me to the drunk tank, right? So then I'm arguing with this dude, whatever. I sit in the drunk tank for a while. Then I go talk to another officer. He's very cool. He's complete opposite. Oh, you're from Clarion County? I hunt there, blah, blah, blah. We're just talking, having fun talking. Finally, I'm like, what am I charged with? And he's like, drunk in public, which is like, whatever. And then he's like, disorderly conduct. And I was like, I didn't commit disorderly conduct. He's like, yeah, you did. And I was like, really? He's like, let me bring up the wording of the law. And in Pennsylvania, I don't have the specific in front of me, but basically it's like actions that could be deemed a nuisance to general members of the public. And he's like, it is so broad that we could basically charge 80% of the people on a given day with disorderly conduct. It's that broad. And he's like, so technically you meet that definition. Now, the way that story ended was that second officer showed up. I paid the fine, but I fought it. And the second officer showed up with me, spoke to the judge on my behalf, and the judge dropped everything before I even talked. So it worked out. But that was a shocking moment for me to like hear an admission. Like oftentimes these laws are written so broadly that we could choose whether or not to enforce them, even if it means that a large swath of the public's guilty of these.
Well, I think when it comes down to like issues like disorderly conduct, you get in a lot of issues of like contempt of cop. I think the whole Tyreek Hill incident's a very good example of that. That I don't know if you've watched the video of that.
Yeah.
He gave him his license, registration. He was getting a little mad because like, don't knock on my window like that. What's a $350,000 McLaren? Yeah, don't come up and thump on it like it's a Toyota Corolla.
Right.
And then and then you have the one cop who, the guy with the hand tats. I'm like, I thought that was always a nice touch to like. He comes run up out of nowhere like, you do what we tell you to do. It's
right.
like. That's a lot of times you're dealing with that, but also, that's really where it comes. That's a very common one here in Ohio. A lot of people get obstructing official business. It's a misdemeanor that gets tacked on, and it's amazing how many times that, especially somebody's been drinking, that just magically seems to appear. But, you see that a lot with cops. It's not as common. Well, I guess I would say. You see it with cops, they will charge like that, but then usually a prosecutor is like, okay, yeah, this probably really wasn't that, or probably really wasn't this. But I'd say in your example, though, if you're screaming, MF this, MF that, or you and that guy are going back and forth, well, at that point, that is generally disorderly.
Right.
Because people would say that meets the definition, not necessarily whatever you did disturbing the general public. But yes, it's, disorderly conduct is very much a catch-all. And as I learned when I was a intern, when I was in law school in a prosecutor's office, I was doing work for a guy. I was listening to some jail calls for him, and I went to the docket he was running, and he ended up dismissing something and amending it down to a way lower type of offense. And he said, remember, at the end of the day, everything is disorderly conduct. Murder is disorderly. At the end of the day. He's like, I could turn a murder into disorderly conduct. And I was like, that's an interesting
that is interesting. That's funny. Yeah. I'll see if you think this is. I've seen some of your videos where you talk about like the importance of knowing your rights, not talking to the police. Do you think it's interesting? Because I do, the Tyreek Hill situation. This is something I go against a lot of my audience on. It seems there's a lot of people on the right, that correctly sometimes point out that some of these cases people are behaving very poorly with police, like running from cops or something, and then it has a bad outcome, and you shouldn't do those things. But in this Tyreek Hill situation, I see a lot of people that share a lot of political beliefs with me. He's like, well, he should have just cooperated. He should have just wound down the window. But simultaneously, they'll agree with someone like you that says, like, know your rights. You don't have to talk, right? Say as little as possible. Like, so do you find that interesting when sometimes you see people that are like, of course, know your rights. Don't if it was the FBI, they'd be like, I don't trust the FBI. Don't talk to the FBI. But when it's Tyreek Hill with the local police, they're like, well, he should have wound down his window. He should have said, cooperated fully with them.
I think for a lot of people, they think they're, Officer Joe is like, oh, he's nice and friendly, and it's my police are different. It's everybody else's cops that suck.
Right.
I think that's some of it, but I also think for a lot of people, especially with like Tyreek Hill, it's like, okay, well, give me your driver's license. Because I was arguing with people about that. He didn't comply. I'm like, he gave him his driver's license. He gave them everything he had to do legally. Keep the window down. I'm like, okay, so if it's raining, does he have to keep the window down? If it's 15 degrees outside, does he have to keep his window down? Or it's September in Miami. I guarantee you it's hot as ballsack outside. Yeah, put the window up. Like, he wasn't hurting anybody. They knew right away that, like, for example, like, one of the cops turned around and said, "Hey, guys, it's Tyreek." So they knew it was him. So they knew he wasn't going to get out of the car with an AK-47 and kill all the poor little policemen and kill all the little baby dogs that are running around. So I think a lot of people, they like to... And I won't say it's... I think people like watching these videos where cops smash a window and drag people out of the car. Sometimes they're hilarious when it's like sovereign citizens. Yeah. But I think a lot of people like seeing that. They like seeing a vulgar display of power because they feel like it's somebody they don't like. And they see, and for some people, it's because Tyreek Hill's black. For some people, it's because Tyreek Hill is driving a McLaren. So fuck him. I'm sorry, can I say...
Yeah, I don't mind at all. No problem.
Fuck him because of that. There's a lot of different reasons why, and there's a lot of people who, they like the government. They like daddy government if it's doing what they think is... I guess I'll say it like this. A lot of people wouldn't mind seeing people get hurt on the train cars as long as the people they liked were hurting people onto the train car.
It's one of the hardest things.
That goes both ways.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do. The lesson. I'm sort of a small government libertarian adjacent person, and I've always I forget where I first heard this, but the mantra of never give the government the authority, never give the government any power that you wouldn't want your worst enemy wielding, right? And so this idea that you always say I want the best treatment even for those I like the least, right? And so if I don't want the government treating me, the cop breaking in my window with a no-knock warrant, then I feel the same way about the alleged gangbanger. And I know that sucks. I know you might say, but that guy's terrible and look what he's doing to the community. Yes, but we don't live in a system where you could just prejudge someone as guilty and say, listen, the cops should be allowed to use any tactics. And it's one of those things. I think that you hit this on, you hit the nail on the head earlier where you talked about a lot of people on the right are back the blue no matter what. And I think that all of a sudden you see, a lot of those people all of a sudden are looking at some of the, what I would consider mistreatment of some of the January 6th people and saying, oh my goodness, look at this. And it's well, does that make you question? Formerly, if you heard a case 4 years ago of the feds going after some Islamic terrorist, do you now say, wait a minute, maybe everything wasn't as it seemed back then as well. So it's tough. It's tough to hold those standards to yourself. But one of the things I wanted to ask you that it's not.
I
go ahead.
Want to answer something. Yeah. Sorry. David Atlas, you're saying it's dangerous to have a person behind an opaque window, regardless of who it is. You know what? That's why police officers have bulletproof vests, and there's a bunch of them standing there, and they all got big, shiny guns. Life is dangerous. Oh no, the bad people might hurt me. If you don't want to accept that risk, don't accept the pay, and then try to get a pension in 20 years. There's the cutoff. Bad guys might do bad things to me. Well, go work as a guy reading water meters. It's a lot safer.
By the way, if anyone has questions, Sean's reading some of the chat. And if you put a super chat, we're more likely to see it because I'll grift for money always. But
of course.
But no, feel free. Yeah, anything you want to chime in, that's fine. But if anyone has any questions or comments in the audience that maybe we'll get to, I think that. It's difficult for me. I know, my father-in-law's a cop. I know really great cops. I've personally, growing up in a small town, if you're in a real small town, usually, my town had, 2 cops. One of their sons was our quarterback on our football team. They weren't harassing kids, or it wasn't hey, kids, skateboard. We didn't have that, So I grew up, it was the cops are cool. And they would even be I lived in a town where it was even things hey, man, did you have a beer tonight? Why don't you get in the back of the car? I'll drive you home. Come pick up your car tomorrow. We had cops like that, that were trying to not rock the boat as much as possible.
Sure.
So it's easy to be sympathetic in a lot of senses. And I understand it's a difficult job, and there are oftentimes situations that are insane that they have to deal with. But you have to, I think you're right, on the other hand, you have to be that is a job that we should respect, but also demand that they're held to a higher standard. And if you can't handle that job, that's fine. But then maybe it's not the best thing that you could keep trying to stay there and plug through it, One of the questions I was going to ask you, because I never hear people talk about this, and I would guess that you have a lot to, or I've never had the chance to talk to someone about this. Today, it seems like there's another story breaking that I think it was from the New York Post or maybe the Washington Post, that there was another leak, that the newspaper had received part of the communications of one of the justices talking in February about potential immunity decision. And this comes after famously, the Dobbs decision was leaked out before it was read. Do you see a danger that now there maybe is a precedent being created where we're going to see decisions from higher courts being leaked before the decisions are made public?
I mean, it sounds like, yeah, we've heard that Rubicon's already. Oh, sorry, somebody in chat wanted to see the dog. So.
No problem.
That's Zero Fox is one of my guys. So
What's his name? Clyde.
his name's Clyde. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my audience is saying. That's awesome.
We're to that point, and I will say, thank God. It's 2020. Thank God it took this long.
Right.
I mean, imagine for like Brown versus Board, Heller, or even Bruin. Imagine the things leaking out there, changing, and how that would work out. I'm impressed it took that long. But yes, that's going to be the name of the game going forward. You are going to have as we progress, we're going to get more and more ideologically driven. Well, those same people go to law school. Those same people end up, getting picked as clerks. So yeah, I see that happening more and more, and it's probably going to happen. We'll start seeing that filter down to like state level courts, and we're gonna, that sadly though, that is going to ruin a lot of. It's going to hurt the judiciary quite a bit because if people already start hearing stuff, it's going to make them very malleable to public opinion. Did
you think after the Dobbs leak, remember we saw the protest outside of I think it was Kavanaugh's house. I don't know. And there was apparently an attempted assassination or a potential assassination attempt with Kavanaugh. I was reading there is a federal law, I believe, making it illegal to sort of protest, to try to persuade an officer of the court or a jurist to change their opinion or to affect an outcome. I don't have that specific law in front of me. Did you think that was illegal, those people protesting because of the Dobbs decision outside justices' homes?
I think you run into no at the end of the day because people should be allowed to be out there, and the Supreme Court, they got the Marshal Service, and of the federal law enforcement agencies, they don't take no crap. So you know what? Yeah, somebody's out in front of Kavanaugh's house. Well, he's got a bunch of guys with shiny black guns in front of it. Sorry, they're gonna protest you. You are a part of the government that doesn't really have a lot of accountability at the end of the day. Sure, you could get impeached, or Congress could pass a law abolishing the Judiciary Act and then remove all the Supreme Court justices except for the Chief Justice. But those two things are never going to happen. So this is the only other way people have, and I think that it should exist because give it some time. Eventually, the Supreme Court's going to do something that you don't like, and you're going to want to go say, hey, Justice Barrett, what the fuck are you doing? But or you might go.
The law, though, the way it's written, again, I don't have it in front of me. Certainly I agree that the thrust of the First Amendment should be you should be allowed to criticize any government official. The question is, should you be allowed to do it before they make their decision if the purpose is to alter? So, for example, it makes sense with the jury. Yeah. You would agree with that. Like if you're on a jury and a bunch of people, we're deciding whether or not John Smith is guilty of murder, and John Smith's family can't come to our house with pitchforks saying, you better find him innocent.
It's a little different, though, because if I found out who the jury was, there's bigger issues of how did that leak? And I'm sorry, I misunderstood you for a second there. Yeah, but you already know who the justices are. You know who the judges are. I still think you should be allowed to protest because, if you go protest out in front of the Supreme Court, you're still doing the same thing because you're out in front of his office building. Mm-hmm. I mean, he knows you're there. So, or if he doesn't even know you're there, if I organize a 15,000 person march and we go down the street right in front of his office, okay, well, he's going to know you're there. That can influence him. It could influence him if I get 100,000 people in Philadelphia and we march. Or I could do it in Denver or LA, and, that's all going to get noticed. Or I come on, I go on Tim Pool's show and I start screaming and ranting about something. Or I go on Rachel Maddow and scream and rant about something. Oh, hold on 1 second.
No problem.
Sorry, the dog.
No, you're fine. I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think that one of the things that's unique in this situation is that, for me, right, if I work at a radio station and someone comes and protests me outside the radio station, whatever, to be expected, public figure, etc. But if they come to where my wife and kid is, it seems to possibly have a chance to persuade me more. And the thrust of, I think, why we would even consider limiting free speech in these circumstances with the jurist is we don't want to get in a situation where we have people involved in the legal system that are so fearful that it's causing them to change. So now with the advent of we're in this post-leaking society, and we see not only just the certainly not criminal, like accusations against Kavanaugh that are life damaging, though, and see the stakes being raised in that way. Now, if we accept to a place where it's like, well, we just accept that all of the docket will be leaked when it's like controversial stuff, and we accept that we allow people to go outside their homes where their wives or husbands and children are, and even we see that there was one assassination attempt. What's to stop a John Roberts from saying, I'm really on the fence here? You know what? I don't want my family killed, so I'll go with the side that's not going to threaten me and my family. Oh, muted.
Sorry, there isn't a whole lot you could do about that, really, at the end of the day. I mean, everybody likes to think they're a gangster until it's time to do gangster stuff. So, you know, this is where you put, it's just like where I tell the jurors during voir dire, hey, you promise to stick this out. If you have an opinion and you're convinced of one view or another, you're going to maintain that, right? Even if everybody's sitting there telling you, change your mind. If you know you're right, you're not going to change that, right? And it doesn't matter, like, oh, it's getting to be like 6 o'clock, I got to go home. Mm-hmm. The wife's going to get mad, I got to pick up the kids, got to mow, do whatever. You're going to maintain that conviction. Like, you're going to and I don't say conviction, but you're going to maintain that position. And they say, yes, but I've also had cases where, it's like 5:45 and they come back with a verdict because, like, let's be real, I got to go home.
Yeah.
And you could put that person in the congressional hearing, like, I promised fuck those protesters. I will do what I think is right and necessary. Mm-hmm. And then they finally get in there, they get on the bench and they go like, oh my God, you can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Souter. Everybody thought he was going to be, he was nominated by Reagan, and then he turned out to be kind of a dingbat. Well, that's all you can do.
Right. No, I get it. I definitely do. While we're on cases today, maybe something a little more less political. You got any thoughts on the Diddy indictment? Did you go through any of that? What'd you think of that?
Poor child. It's surprising though they didn't indict him for as much as R. Kelly did.
Right.
But the RICO thing, I think they have much more of the Diddy enterprise sorted out, so they really are going to stick it to him on a bunch of different RICO counts. And yeah, he's presumed innocent, but there's a lot there. And I will say, if you read, and I covered this months ago, the lawsuit that was filed by one of the guy named Lil Rod, which I think is probably the worst rap name ever to go by in this situation.
Yeah, not good. Yeah.
The only one worse is there is this case in Florida. It's called the YNW trial. And it's a bunch of rappers, and one of the guys that got murdered, his nickname was Sack Chaser, and I'm like, I know he's chasing sacks of money, but it's
right. Yeah, I don't know how well that flies in prison, right?
So, yeah, Diddy's got a lot of problems there. I mean, he's got the Mann Act violations, allegations, trafficking women across state lines for the purpose of prostitution and sex acts, minors being involved, and if you read the lawsuit that I covered back at the beginning of the year. This guy, he filed his lawsuit. It reads like an indictment. It's very well structured. It has a ton of exhibits in it. And it's all these pictures of this guy hanging out with Diddy and Cuba Gooding Jr. And there's but if you read it, it talks about, this one rapper just had a great Vegas residency. And it's like, it's Usher. And then there's Chris Brown. Then he lists out like Meek Mill is listed in this complaint. There's a ton of guys who are involved in this. Drake is in this. The scope of what Diddy is going to destroy is going to be very, this is going to send shockwaves. And the thing was, because I ran into a couple people talking about this who were more connected to the hip-hop world. When R. Kelly was going down, they said, the whispers are always out there of all these other artists are going down. And then, Diddy's next. And, a lot of people are rumoring with Diddy. That means, Jay-Z's going down next. Or a lot of people are.
Yeah.
A lot of names are going to get spilled.
And one of the things, this isn't really in the scope of legality necessary, but just the way things play out with, reputation. As weird as this sounds, I kind of feel bad for some people that will get caught up in this that maybe didn't do anything nefarious. Like, it is entirely possible that you're like some low-level celebrity or whatever that get invited to Diddy's house and you're like, cool, Diddy. And you're sitting there drinking, and maybe you even see people what you think consensually hooking up. Maybe you partake or you don't. And now, knowing what we know in hindsight, you might not have been spiking anyone's drink. You might not have, you may have been totally ignorant of any of that. And unfortunately, I think you'll see a rush to like, oh, that guy was at Diddy's house. He must have did something. He was there, right? And I think I understand the impetus of it because the accusations are so heinous, and you want to be like, well, you didn't know anything? You didn't know that these girls were being drugged? You didn't know they were being brought across state lines? And it's like, but it's entirely within reason that there could be a person like, no, I did not know that. I thought that I was just going to a celebrity's party and there was attractive women there. That's what I thought,
Well, but I will say when it comes to that, I would caution and say, Cat Williams, the comedian, has talked about this a lot. Like, everybody knows what happens at Diddy's house.
Yeah, that's...
Or, or even 50 Cent. There are these clips of him talking about 10, 15 years ago. Diddy wanted to take me shopping, and Diddy's like, 50's like, I almost wanted to go stomp a mud hole in him at that point because he knows where that's all going.
Yeah, yeah,
so I think a lot of people might be able to say I didn't know, but I think a lot more people are gonna have to say like, I ain't saying nothing at this point because they knew something was up.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, and it. I say this about streamers all the time. Doesn't it seem like once you get to a certain level, it's like everyone's a scumbag? Like the entertainment industry seems like that. It's some
like lawyers.
It's like does it take being a scumbag to make it to the top, or once you make it, does it make you the pressures are too much that it makes you a scumbag? But it does seem like you look at other situations, like maybe not the hip hop community, but like with Harvey Weinstein and the allegations that surrounded those, and it's like you could watch old Family Guy episodes where they're joking about Weinstein. It's like everybody knew. They all knew, but it was like, well, we're making a lot of money, and I'm not going to be the one to rock the boat, so we'll just go along like it's business.
15 years of R. Kelly peeing on people jokes.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So I think from having done, cases of people where they've been accused of assaulting, children and other people in inappropriate ways, those types of positions where there's that power and that access, they draw people to those situations. That's why you do see it as, coaches, teachers, religious figures. You see it, and there's a common thing that draws them there. It's that control, the authority, and the access. Well, Harvey Weinstein was going to be a scumbag no matter what. It's just he got lucky and got to a point where he could be that scumbag. Diddy, I mean, think about Diddy, all the things he did going back with like J-Lo and Shine when they had I remember reading about that as a kid. It's like, dude, skated on a shooting. That's pretty hardcore. And now you have like Keefe D, the guy who orchestrated the hit on Tupac. He's like, it sounds like he said, yeah, Diddy told me to do it, or Diddy paid me off to do it. So it's a lot of people who do these really massive bad things, they were bad people, and this is an opportunity for them to act out. And even R. Kelly, when you watch like Surviving R. Kelly, R. Kelly went through a lot of bad things, but none of those made him do what he did once he became an adult.
I think that's a great point you make there. So my job is I do home health care with people with adults with disabilities. So a lot of autism, a lot of people that are nonverbal. I question
extremers.
Right, exactly. I question statistics always, but I do believe this. The rates of like sexual assault to the type of people that I take care of are through the roof. And it's and a lot of people that are in my position are oftentimes predators, because what you find is if you just look at my job, I am basically alone 24 hours a day for most of the week with a person that would have a lot of trouble communicating to someone if they're being taken advantage of. And that tends, just like you'll see a lot of people that work with very young children, like in schools or daycares, when you are put in a position of power and there's very little supervision over you, and there are people that maybe don't have the ability to communicate, to kind of speak up if you're doing something, it does seem to attract that. And I think that it's a different level of it when you're talking celebrity, but that power imbalance is still there, right? Where it's like, well, you're Diddy, you can get away with it. Who's gonna speak up? There's billions of dollars flowing through the entertainment industry there, so who wants to be the first person? And it's weird. I remember, I'm old. I'm 40, so I'm only slightly older than you. I mean, I remember back in the day listening to like Corey Feldman talk about this, and with stories of Corey Haim and you know, all these other people. And then just recently we've seen, I don't know if you saw this, that Quiet on the Set documentary about Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider. It's so weird because it's all this stuff that you kind of in your mind imagine. Like, I bet stuff like that goes on. But when you see like the proof of it, like this guy did this to Drake and he basically gets no time, like a year or two. And then he gets hired at Disney after he serves time for, you know, assaulting one of the child stars. And you're just like, is it really that bad? Is it really like your worst fears of the people that you hear that you're kind of like, yeah, I agree with them, it's probably bad. But you're like, my goodness, to see the proof of it, it's shocking.
Yes, is there really a cabal of interdimensional psychic vampire pedophiles?
Get him, Jones. Get him, Alex. Yeah, it doesn't sound so
maybe.
crazy now. Yeah. It really, man. But that Diddy story is really a bummer. Like this is a totally tertiary thing, but you get these, like, I have these arguments with people. It's like, when are you obligated to stop liking the entertainment of someone who's a real scumbag? Like, Cosby Show's not funny anymore. I'm sorry, Cosby Show's still funny. I still think that Remix to Ignition's a badass song, even though R. Kelly's so it's like, I never liked P. Diddy anyways. I think all of his music sucked. But you know, someone will go down here in this new wave that I was like, shit, I kind of like that.
Well, yeah, it's like if you're watching a Roman Polanski film, can you not like that? Can you not like, oh crap, what are some other good ones out there? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff out there. Like, you know, can you not cheer for Cain Velasquez because he
shot that guy? Yeah,
shot at a guy that he is accused of diddling his kid. Like, well, no, you can still like the work they've done, but you can't just be like, oh yeah, he's a good man, or I love him to death. You're like, yeah, there's a lot of problems there.
It's crazy. What do you think about, so someone who's spent time in the courtroom, did you find this story crazy here in Kentucky where it looks like this local sheriff shot and killed this judge? Isn't this like an insane story?
Yeah, that's like a side plot out of Justified, man. And the funny thing is, that county's like right next to Harlan County, and
where Justified took place.
Yeah. So but when I first heard this judge got murdered in his chambers during the day, and I'm like, how the hell did you get a gun into a courtroom? Right. And then immediately I was like, oh, the sheriff did. I'm like, well, there's only one group of people with guns at a courthouse, and I'm like, yes, you have to trust that they're not going to have a bad day because there's nowhere to go.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, I know, like, there's accusations that there was personal animosity. I'm hearing that possibly it had to do with the relationship with the sheriff's daughter. But whatever the case, like, is that someone who's spent, no doubt, I'm guessing, as a defense attorney, you've probably been in court with some characters that maybe have been prone to commit violence. Have you ever felt like intimidated in a situation where you thought some level of violence could break out, like while you're in a trial?
No, you can't feel that way. I've never had a personal threat ever put against me. And, the idea is like, well, aren't you worried like your client might start attacking you or something? I'm like, oh, I guess if that happens, I'll deal with it. But like, there's courtroom deputies right there. Like, okay, great. I'll probably get on court TV because they'll be like, oh, look at that attorney getting his ass kicked. Like, but them's are the breaks. And the idea of when I worked in the prosecutor's office, like, you go to Walmart, like, oh, well, most people, there are a handful of people, if they told me they were going to kill me, I would truly be worried about it. And none of them are people I've ever run into in a courtroom. And there's, there are 5 of them, and, none of them are, you don't know any of them. And, that's kind of the way I look at it. But yeah, there's always propensity for people to lash out or things go crazy. But yeah, I just imagine, like, there's times where I've been sitting there like, oh, I'm meeting the judge for some reason, not related to a case, but hey, the judge and I want to talk about something. Or the prosecutor are sitting there waiting. Hey, we need to talk to the judge. And we're getting ready to walk into his chambers, and the county commissioner walks in, or another judge walks over. And guess what? You got to sit to the side. And I've had it before where the sheriff's walking in. Hey, I need to talk to Judge Smith. Okay, cool. And you just sit there in the chambers, and you hear the door close, and then all of a sudden you're going to hear in Kentucky, blam, 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 blam. And the sheriff comes walking out like, you're like, what the hell just happened?
It's crazy. It was such a crazy story. And that's what I thought of too. I am obsessed with, like, I don't have cable, so I watch like YouTube videos, the court TV, like crazy court incidents. And you're right. The first one that comes to mind is the Sovereign Citizens, which I can't help but just, it's so good. Like, it's just so good watching these people, like, And I sympathize with the plight of the sovereign citizen in the idea that I think sometimes government can be tyrannical and it's like someone sticking up, but it's just so comical. It's like, okay, dude, I don't think the 10-minute YouTube video you watch is getting you out of this traffic ticket. Sorry, man.
No.
You know, but those videos are crazy. Like, just, you know, all kinds of stuff you see, you know, a family that rushes an accused that, you know, is tackling them, or someone who freaks out and like rushes the judge or their attorney or whatever. Like, you don't know anyone who's ever been on the old court TV, craziest court cases?
No, but I've had a couple times where weird, like crazy stuff has gone down in court. And I've had, I got on the news once because of this. I was I was in the public defender's office at the time. We were representing a guy, and he was known as the Toledo toe sucker. And he was running around sucking on women's toes.
Wow.
And we had a pre-trial, and I wasn't like running his case exactly at that point, but I was running this courtroom, and he had it scheduled for that morning, and I was just taking care of it. And he left, and our intern comes walking up to me. He's like, he's talking to the press right now outside. I look at the judge, and I'm like, can I have a minute? Judge is like, you should probably go take care of that. And he's out there talking to the news, and I come kind of like, I don't run, but you walk down the hall. And you get there, and you're like, hey, you know, sir, you really shouldn't do this. This is, you know, we don't recommend you speaking to the press. You know, anything you say here could be used against you. And out the corner of my eye, I noticed that he's not just talking to the reporter, but the red light on the camera's on. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is recording. And he basically kind of like tells us off. He's like, you know, I know what I'm doing. I know my rights. I'm very intelligent. I know how to handle it. And I say, like, please, really, you shouldn't do this. And he ended up not like stepping all over his dick, but he ends up going back to the reporters. Like, as I said, I'm far more intelligent than these gentlemen. And he starts going and going and going. And then later that day, I got on the news, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
That's great. Your family seeing you. Oh, I'm glad to see you were we saw you with the Toledo toe sucker.
No, that's what happened. So I was driving home. It was a Friday. And I told I got done with court, and I went downstairs and told my boss, I'm like, I think I'm going to get on the news. And he's like, what happened? If we told him, he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. You're fine. You did a good job. It was on the 12 o'clock news for like 10 seconds, but they didn't talk. They didn't cover us. The 6 o'clock news, though, it came on. And by that point, I'm already driving home to see my parents for the weekend. And my phone I'm like down the turnpike, and I was here. Bzz, and I'm like, what? Bzz, 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 bzz. And he's 20. Was it 20? Yeah, it was 2017 at the time. And my Facebook, you know, when I still had it, was just everybody I knew, even going back to high school, found out about it. And then my mom calls, she's like, oh my God, you're on the news. And then she sent it to my grandma, and my grandma called me. She's like, oh my gosh, you made the news. I'm so proud of you. I'm like, no.
I did it. Finally, my goal of being on the news with the Toledo toes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome. At least you got a story out of it, though. Like, you'll have that the rest of your life, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad it was only that bad and embarrassing.
Right. Real quick, this is the last thing I'll ask about a legal issue, and then we'll just talk a little politics if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Can you give people some advice? Because believe it or not, I've actually dealt with someone who look, I'm not too arrogant. I think I'm a reasonably smart person, but I'm smart enough to know to shut my mouth and get an attorney to represent me in court. I had a friend of mine who, not very smart at all, that took that route. I don't need an attorney. I'm going to go up for like some criminal charges, and I'm going to waive my right to an attorney and defend myself. Can you just explain to people how, even if you think you're very smart, that's a huge mistake?
Well, yeah, it's think about it like, would you do surgery on yourself? I mean, there's that picture of that guy in Antarctica. He had to do it, but he was also a doctor.
Right.
And there was nobody else around, and he had to cut his own appendix out. But otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of ways to get this wrong. The ways the law is set up, the rules that apply. You know, you get treated as an attorney when you show up in there, so you have to abide by the rules. And I would say to people who do that, there are people who get away with it. There's all kinds of things that happen that way, but you know, the guy who made Ocean Gate Titan, like, I could build my own submarine. I don't need nautical engineers or naval architects. What do they know? Apparently a lot.
Right, it catches up, yeah.
You know, you can build your own airplane. You could build your own parachute. You could pack your own parachute. You could do a lot of things on your own. And I would say, actually, defending yourself in court's like Packing a parachute. Sure, you can pack your own parachute. Are you sure it's going to work? Do you know it's going to work? Oh, I read it in a book. Okay, well, did you take classes on it? No. Are you trained on it? No. So yes, your parachute might work. You also might scream into the ground at 100 miles an hour.
Right.
I will say the amount of people who defend themselves, it generally doesn't go well. Now, if it's like a speeding ticket, yeah, go for it. Knock yourself out. Or like, oh, I need to, I got caught without a seatbelt on, or something like that. Yeah, you're fine. But anything like that could be potentially serious. Yeah, I would recommend you get an attorney. And if you can't afford one, ask for a court-appointed attorney too. Public defender, those guys will take care of you as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's an admission of like a lack of intelligence on your part or an admission of guilt. It's literally, it's like a different language. No one faults you for not knowing it. It's like you need someone that can translate what you want to say to the court. There is one question in the audience here for you. John Ruck says, Sean, I got a subpoena because I gave evidence in a case due to my job. Is there a dress code to show up or does it not matter?
Well, what you need to do with that subpoena is call whatever party gave it to you and say, do you need to see me? Is this for trial? And ask them what's going on with it, because they'll tell you what it's for. If it's for trial, you don't have, just don't show up in, if you show up in jeans and a tee, like whatever it is you're wearing to your job, I guess, but that all depends respectively. If you show up in slacks and a polo, that's probably fine. Depending on your job, it really all depends. Could you show up in a suit and tie? Sure. Could you show up in just a shirt and tie? Sure. Could you pull a Detective Sipowicz and wear a short sleeve button-down shirt and a tie like Homer does too?
Yeah.
Sure. You can wear jeans and a t-shirt. Just don't wear things with holes in them. Don't wear, your 420 shirt to court. Just wear like a nice clean shirt, a nice clean pair of pants, and you are ahead of like 90% of the people that have to show up to court. Because most people show up to court like they're going to ride the bus.
Yeah. When I showed up, right, when that cop showed up and spoke for me, it was interesting. I'd never been to a court proceeding like this, so it was in Pittsburgh. And the way it worked was, it was like, you know what movie I like? There's an old, is it called My Fellow American? I don't know what it's called. There's an old Al Pacino court movie from like the late 70s. It's really good, though, where he's a defense attorney. And I remember watching that movie when I was younger. I really liked it. And there's these court scenes where people would go in, and they take like 10 people in at a time. And that's where I was in this situation where it was like, they're just rapid fire, like, let's get through each of these, right? So I'm in there, and I'm like second person in my group of 10 or whatever, and we're all sitting on this back bench, and the judge is just like, I brought my friend with me, and we were in a metal show. Now, my friend's got like 7 piercings in his lip, and he's, I'm like, dude, try to dress up. He shows up with this, Slayer t-shirt and baggy black pants. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm like ready to defend myself, and this was something, it wasn't like, literally it was just like a $300 fine I'd already paid. So I didn't get an attorney because at that point the stakes were low enough, but I figured I'd challenge it. The cop stands up first and speaks for me. And the judge says, do you have anything you want to say to me? And I was like, I just want to say I really respect this officer and thank him for understanding. Because it was evident the judge was going to be like, okay, you're good to go. And then he looks at my friend and goes, does your witness want to speak, or is his mouth stapled shut there? And my friend's like, I'm good. And I got all the charges dropped. But I thought it was a funny comment by the judge, which sort of, and when I looked around, kind of just speaking what you are, like, it was sort of amazing to me. If you're showing up and you're the defendant, you would think you'd put a little effort in, but no, there's people there that just look like, now if you're coming from work or something, that's one thing, but there are people there.
And that's not what I'm getting at,
right?
Because I get you have to show up, but I've been to court before, and I remember seeing this. It was a lady, she showed up to court. It was for felony probation violation. And she showed up wearing a wife beater that was a size too small.
Yep.
And she was muffin topping really hard over her yoga pants. And she was wearing Crocs. Yep. And I'm like, yes, I say this all the time on my channel, especially when we're watching trials. Being, court is just like a lot of things in life. It's all about sales. You are selling something. You want the judge to buy something. You want him to buy whatever it is you want to happen. Well, part of it is looking the part. And you might say that's not fair, but you know what? That's how we operate as human beings. So
it was a hard lesson for me. I did policy debate in college, and our rule was the way a tournament normally works is you have 2 days of debating, and then the third day is a single elimination tournament that only the top half of the teams qualified for. And our rule was if you qualified for that third day, you could wear whatever clothes you want. So I'd wear like khakis, a button down. I had this huge beard, long, greasy hair. I was a metal. I was like going to metal shows on my time off. I was a drunk. And I got pretty good. And the third day, I'd wear like all my metal T-shirts because I was like thumbing my eye, and all these rich kids like, "F you, I'll fucking come in here and rock you. I'm just some hick redneck, that listens to metal." And my coach pulled me aside one day and was like, "Listen, man, I know you think you're making some statement, but you're fucking yourself, because if you actually trimmed up, wore a tie, a dress shirt, you would win so many more rounds." And I was like, bullshit. It's all about who has the best argument, which is similar to how I would feel about court. And it's like, yeah, but it's not that simple, because it's humans that we're dealing with, and how you present yourself matters. And if you come in looking like an asshole and it's a close round and you didn't blow the other side out, perceptually, they might be inclined to vote against you. And so you want to take every advantage you can. And if that means dressing up and wearing dress shoes and, cleaning up your beard and getting a more reasonable haircut. And so that was a tough lesson for me, because I was like, fine, I'll do it your way for a couple tournaments. And all of a sudden I was winning tournaments. I went from taking like third or fourth place to winning. And he's like, told you. And I hated being wrong about that. I really did. Because there is something in us, I think, that wants to be like, the truth matters. The best argument matters. That's all that matters. But that's not humanity. Like you said, you're selling something. Just because you're selling the best car doesn't mean you get the sell. If that other guy had a better sales pitch than you, he sells the car and you don't.
Mm-hmm. And then we said you did debates. Were you doing the debates where people are like,
oh, yeah.
Or were you doing the Lincoln Douglas stuff?
No, I did some LD, but I did policy. Yeah, so spewing down like an auctioneer. Everything's nuclear war.
Yeah,
people rapping and shit. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, it's fun, but it was also, you learned a lot, and there are skills I learned, and I made a lot of friendships and stuff. But the absurdity of it, I liken it to modern art, where it's like, all these people are huffing their own farts for years and years and years in their little insular community, that now anyone who's a reasonable person that comes in from outside the community for 5 seconds is just like, this is unrecognizable gibberish. This is so fucking stupid. And it's sad that it's became that, but that's what it is,
Yeah, and I've seen I saw that when I was in college, and these guys, I went to, I was like, oh, what do these guys do? A debate? Okay, it sounds fun. And it was like going to auctioneer school, listening to, oh, you read the script, and what's the point? You're like, oh, you have to say as much as you can before time runs out. I said, okay, and what? He's like, well, that's how you win, if you say more things than the other guy.
Pretty much. If I say, like, for example, this would be, now, granted, debate's weird because the rules are also up for debate. So depending on, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, did you convince that judge to sign the ballot for you? That's all that matters. And because a judge might say, fuck the rules, because that happens. Like, the topic is subsidies, and the other team stands up and says, fuck that, give the land back to the Indians. And you're like, what's that have to do with subsidies? And the judge says, I agree, give the land back to the Indians. You can't complain, wait a minute, the rules say you have to talk about the topic. They'll say, I don't give a shit,
And that's what you can do in the law. You can say, Your Honor, you can always say, we're not playing by that rule today. We're playing by a rule of something else. So you can definitely do that in the law.
Oh, I'm getting reminded. It's okay if you swear, but I'm getting reminded to stop swearing because recently my 3-year-old's been dropping some words he shouldn't. Okay. So I'll thank you, people in the audience, reminding me not to swear. It's not because he listens to my show. It's because if I swear here, then I'm more likely to swear in my normal conversation. So, but yeah, here's a fun tidbit about policy debate. I don't know if you've ever listened to REM, but the song "It's the End of the World as We Know It," that's a song about debate. So Michael Stipe went to his high school debate tournament and was interested in a debate. And all he heard was people talking as fast as possible, and everything's nuclear war, volcanoes exploding, wiping out the earth, earthquakes wiping out the earth. So if you listen to the lyrics of that song, he's just rapid firing a bunch of like extinction scenarios. And then the chorus is, it's the end of the world and I feel fine, because he's like, it's so weird to watch these people talking about auctioneers about 50 ways the earth's going to end. And then they're like shaking hands with big smiles on their face. So that's what stuck with him. That's where that song came from.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
makes sense in hindsight.
Yeah, it's neat. So let's talk. Go ahead.
And this might be probably more of the legal or like a clash or a blend of it. You mentioned you talk about like Hunter Biden and stuff like that. So yeah, we can do that. Well,
I was gonna eschew that, but I was just gonna ask you, like, do you mind telling us who you're voting for? How do you think the election's shaping out? Do you have any predictions or anything like that?
I mean, I would say at this point, I was surprised we've had a second assassination attempt. I won't be surprised if there's another one.
Me too, yeah.
And I kind of get the feeling that one will be a little more It won't be kinetic. It'll be more energetic, if you catch my drift, as far as what may happen or attempt, because you can only do so many gunmen in the woods type scenarios.
Yes.
But I think the polls are getting ridiculous on both sides, because now you see, like, the ones for, like, you see the ones with, like, Cruz and Allred, and, like, where's it going to go? This one's going to be, it's not going to be a blowout either way. I don't expect it to be a blowout either way. But I would prefer to see Trump to win for a lot of different reasons. I'd love to see people lose their absolute goddamn minds, is one of the reasons why. But I think there's a very real likelihood of Kamala winning.
Yeah, I think that Kamala will win. Now, I also think that there's a tilting of the scale. One of the things I said after the 2020 election was, I don't mind people that are talking about potential fraud. Shit, I'm not a free speech absolutist. I think there are things that you shouldn't be allowed to say on platforms. But in general, hey man, you want to talk your conspiracy theory? Cool by me. The government's argument is Epstein killed himself. That's as ridiculous as I've heard. So you say whatever you want, man. That's cool by me. But I didn't really delve into a lot of the, Dominion voting machines and, blah, blah, blah. I thought it was ridiculous that those people were being censored. But my question was, what if none of that happened? What if we exist in a society where if one side basically has control of all of these mechanisms, such as the intel community and the majority of the mainstream media and the majority of corporate American,
want to talk to each other ahead of time,
right? And what if they, there's this professor, I don't know if you've heard of him, his name's Robert Epstein. He testified that, like, Google potentially manipulated 16 million votes through manipulation of algorithm. That's how powerful, like, a search engine could be. What do we do if we live in a society where those groups all say, and I'm not even saying just Democrat, they're just like, we've decided this is who the president should be. Like, we may live in a society already where they're putting their thumb on the scale is so significant that it doesn't even matter if it's someone who's objectively terrible and the other candidate's really good, because it's like, all that matters, like you said, all that matters is the sale. And if you can't hear the other side, or if the thumb's put on the scale in such a way. And so that's why I think that Kamala will win, because I think that maybe a candidate more skillful than Trump could overcome that, but it would be difficult for anyone. But I think given the negatives baked in with Trump, and then sort of what I see is like a full court press. I mean, Kamala's basically running a campaign from her basement, even worse than Joe Biden did. And the media is just running it for her. And all of these institutions are running it for her, and it's working.
She's still come out more than Biden. And I will say, the amount of people who have been energetic for Kamala, though, has actually been impressive. Like, I was surprised by that, because I figured, Kamala, like, I honestly went into this thinking, like, Kamala's basically the chick from Veep.
Yeah.
And that's the way she had been acting the whole time. And, Biden bowing out like that, I really was surprised at the wind and the sails people had for Kamala. Now, do I think she's going to be good at this? No. And I do think it's very interesting that a lot of people on the left are backing they're like, well, it's the prosecutor versus the felon. It's like, yes, and people who cheer and clap for the decarceral state are now voting for Kamala the cop. And it's like,
that the inverting of that, it's very interesting.
Yes,
like,
and it's,
I think I saw this, not to get too far back into legal, but I saw this with the Michael Flynn pleading guilty, right? And I would argue, like, well, I don't think he was really guilty. I think he was pressured into that because he was afraid they were going to go after his son. And all these people on the left will be like, no. And I'm like, but one of the arguments that the left always made that I bought was false confessions, right? Where, like, and there's a whole Netflix series about it. I forget what, like, the confession tapes, where they goad these people. The psychological torment that, like, law enforcement could put on a person, 24 hours of interrogation. All of a sudden, these people are willing to sign anything. Like, sure,
Ultimately, though, Michael Flynn talked too much was his problem.
That's right.
Whether or not he was truly guilty or truly innocent, Michael Flynn talked himself into a hole.
Right.
And then you have, like, the FBI, where their written statements are the only record. I know that guy, Jeremy Kaufman, you saw his Twitter, where the FBI rolled up to his house. Record the FBI chat.
Yeah.
Do not let them, because what they write down on that form is the only documentation. They get to come into court and wave that around saying, this is my official document. Well, can it ever be altered or edited? Yeah, but it's still their official document. So,
can we get a group of you lawyers together to here's something I've been saying for years. I can't
No, Rob,
can't
you
believe-
don't want to hear my answer for the FBI. Is
Well,
not,
I want to disband it. But how about this? Just as a simple start. I have this. I'm not a wealthy man. It's got this camera right here. It could record things. How in the hell is our FBI not recording interviews?
because they don't want to.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's sad that no one's like sat down and said, and even in the Flynn case, they admitted, oops, we wrote a couple things that were erroneous in our records. We'll correct it after the, it's like, even if you want to take maliciousness out of it, there's a solid chance that if I'm interviewing you right now and it's not recorded and I'm just taking notes, I could, especially in a legal case where one wrong word could make the difference between your, like, these are humans. They're fallible. They could screw up. And that's if they're not corrupt, you know?
Yeah, well, I use the example all the time. We all screw up at our jobs. If you work at McDonald's, you might put a pickle on a burger and it says no pickles. Okay, you're flying a space shuttle. You might be off by like a quarter of a degree. Like everybody screws up at their job. You might forget to put a cover sheet in your TPS report. There's a spectrum of jobs and a spectrum of mistakes. Now, the scale of that mistake and the result, okay, those are very different, but we all screw up on our jobs.
Yeah, and it's really, I just can't, I get it if these are policies that were created in the 40s. Difficult, possibly, for the FBI at the time to carry around audio equipment. But we have a society where literally every single person has the ability to video and audio record at any time. And our FBI can't literally be like, hey, we're going to be recording this so that we have some sort of it just it really illustrates to me. And again, this is something you would think that you could get the left on board with, because they correctly will say, like, well, if you're talking about the police dealing in an inner city situation, oftentimes they could railroad, someone out, a race, systemic racism or systemic poverty causes police to do these, whatever. It is true that could happen. That's why they want police body cams. There's a big sort of bipartisan movement for that, but not for the FBI to record interviews. It just seems like it's one of these spots where the only reason that it's not a big issue is no one on the right's really capable of articulating it, and the left that otherwise you would think would be on top of this are like, screw it, right now it's benefiting, it's going against people we don't like, so screw it, we don't care.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's really more of the issue now as well. It's benefiting me, so who cares? And then should that change, then the right will just as very quickly say, like, man, this is good enough.
Yeah. Well, I think my conspiracy mind, it goes here. I think at the top level, the Republican and Democratic Party, they're very similar in that they enjoy their hegemony on power. So they don't want a third party, right? And you could go back to, who was it? Was it like, back in the day, it was like the League of Women Voters used to control the debates. Wasn't it like 88 or something? They always allowed third parties on the presidential debate stage. And the Republicans and Democrats came together to be like, no third party or we won't be there. So the League of Women Voters were like, okay, we're out. Like, we were doing this sort of nonpartisanly, so if it's going to be two sides colluding, we're out of this game. And so now, I think it's not controversial to say the Republicans and Democrats both mutually don't want a third party. But I also think they don't want people that are considered outside their sort of orthodoxy to come up through the ranks. And so for me, I think the problem Trump runs into with a lot of this stuff is, at the top level, I'm not so sure that the Mitt Romneys, the Mitch McConnells, the Paul Ryans really give a shit. I think that they're kind of like, you know what, we don't like Trump. And so,
the easiest example of that is Dick Cheney.
Right. Old warmonger Dick. He was Darth Vader to the left, and now they're touting his support.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. The people that were screaming, and he's Hitler, he's just the worst man in the world. He started the Iraq War, which is a crime. He should hang for what he did there. Lynn Cheney. Like, a lot of people don't realize this, but Lynn Cheney was in the State Department. She was high up in the State Department. She helped push and pimp the Iraq War, too. If there were, she would have been on trial at Nuremberg for what she did.
Well, Alberto Gonzalez signed the torture memo. He's coming out supporting Kamala. The left's like, are you kidding me? I marched with them. I marched with the left against Cheney and Gonzalez back in the early 2000s. And now my friends that marched with me are calling me like, oh, you've really changed. I'm like, you're on the side of Dick Cheney. Like, what are you talking about?
Cheney has your back.
Yeah.
He likes what you're doing.
It's surreal to me. It is.
Well, it's because it's a, it's somebody that, and John Bolton. John Bolton's like, Trump is dangerous. Like, yes, because he doesn't want to turn Iran into a glowing pile of glass.
Right.
We're sorry, John. You're not going to get your war.
Yeah.
And I'll throw John McCain into that category. John McCain didn't get it. It's like that meme of the, Horton McBloodlust, the 110-year-old senator from Iowa. Please, God, let me see one more war.
Right, just one more. Yeah. There's this in debate. We 1 year the topic had to do with China, and our affirmative was based on this book. I think it was called China, the Emerging Threat. And the guy who wrote the book's name was Konstantin Menzies, I believe was his name. And the foreword of the book explained what he was doing. The dude finished the book on his deathbed. And he's like, alls I want before I die is for us to preemptively strike China. Now imagine like this man, like with a curled hand, like ridden with some disease, just penning the last words of like, please bomb China before I'm Now, as far as debate, which is just arguing to win a game, sounds good, man. More hyperbolic language is good. So it's good to have an author that's saying like, if we don't bomb those damn Chinese, we're all going to be speaking Mandarin in the next 2 years. So it was good for debate, but to think that there are people, those people exist, it really is.
No, that guy's very much like From Hell's Heart. I stab at thee.
Yeah, right. You gotta, hey, and at some point you gotta appreciate the passion, I guess. But yeah,
Yes, there's a lot of passion in wanting to microwave Beijing.
Sure, yeah. But I think that's one of the problems with, like, we were talking about lawfare, but other things that, like, I think that the problem is the establishment Republican Party, the like sort of old Paul Ryan leading the party, they are kind of like, they hesitate. Some of them will come right out and say, like your Liz Cheney's or whatever, but many of them will just be like, well, we ain't gonna speak up too much. Let them bury this guy. And to be fair, Trump brings some of it on himself. You know, like
a lot of it on himself,
right? And so I could see it being exhausting if you're Mitch McConnell, who's basically out to lunch. I mean, he's Joe Biden 2.0 as far as he's having significant mental problems. Yeah. So I could see, like, it's a lot to ask them to be like, yeah, okay, this guy pisses us off a lot, but what's happening here is really bad. Just, you know.
Yeah. And the other thing is, though, too, and, you know, this is where, because I've said this and people get mad at me when I say it, you know, let's say it all goes away tomorrow. Well, who runs the GOP? Well, it's not going to be Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's going to be people like Speaker Johnson. It would be Paul Ryan. It would be all of those guys again. And then they'd say, yeah, we're going back to doing what we want again. So, you know, that is the grind there. And I think it's very funny because this is where I will say, because I do watch Jimmy Dore quite a bit.
I like Jimmy,
and when you watch like the Young Turks, they point out that, you know, like the insurgent wing of the Democrat Party, like the progressives, you know, and they point out, like, you guys didn't, like, Kamala was going up for the nomination. You guys didn't leverage in it. You didn't leverage the power you had. But then you see people, you know, like AOC, she's controlled opposition. It's just like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's controlled opposition. You know, within the party, she gets to run on the long leash. And, you know, she could, like, oh, look, she's the crazy woman. And then, you know, within the Democrat Party. But in reality, she knows she's on the leash and she's doing her thing. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene goes out and does their own thing. And I've argued those two are kind of like counterbalancing forces in nature.
Yes.
You know, you have that amount of cringe and stupidity on both sides where you have to balance it out. Nature needs balance.
Yeah, and they both, and like, not to talk on looks a lot, but both like conventionally attractive ladies that have. Yeah, it is weird how similar it is on that level of. Yeah, and I totally agree. I think the difference to me, it's not that I am conservative, but I consider myself a populist first and foremost, and then secondly libertarian adjacent. So conservatism's third on my list, right? But I think that, for me, what I've seen, I like Mike Benz. He talks a lot about free speech online. I don't know if you followed him at all. I do think that when he illustrates that sort of our intel community sees a problem with right-wing populism, the reason that the problem's with right-wing populism, it's not that there hasn't been efforts for populism on the left. And by populism, I just mean sort of organic movements of people trying to say the government's not really working for us, right?
Yeah, because we're going to curtail the intelligence community.
Right.
One of their big
That's exactly. We don't like these wars. We don't like the bailing out the banks. Like,
yes.
That's
I don't like all these spooks running around, guys. And I'm not using.
We got it.
They're going to try to clip it. They're going to try to run with that on you. But yeah, like Project Mockingbird was real.
Yep.
And instead of them influencing people, now you see Project Mockingbird went from basically having reporters in the CIA's pocket to now you have like General Hayden on there. You have all these FBI gliwies on the news all the time. Yep. And then you do have people like Anderson Cooper who are likely some sort of CIA asset or were a CIA asset doing things. Really,
Yeah.
you guys Google that if you didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
yeah. He totally looks like a CIA asset too. But yeah, you're right. There is a lot of that goes on.
Well, it never went away. It just changed shape. It changed its name. And yes, they abhor the idea of, well, like the surveillance state, a state security apparatus, whether it's led by the left or right. I don't want the FBI that big. Well, now they're going to get mad at me. It's just like if you're like, I'm going to, if you're running for city council, I'm going to stick it to the police union. Guess who the police union's not going to back?
Yeah.
When it comes election time.
Yep, that's right. And, famously, I think, Chuck Schumer said before Trump was sworn in 2016, you can't criticize the FBI. They'll find 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you, which is exactly what's happened. But it's like, for me, I think that I'm not making a claim right good, left bad. Though in my heart, I probably believe that. But in my head, I know that's not true. And so what I'm saying, though, is that I think what happened was the left was successfully co-opted better. Because to me, it's like if you go back to Vietnam, you had these countervailing forces. Yes, you had sort of traditional America, like conservative America, that may have been more pro-military. And you had sort of politicians, and you had maybe people that were going to church that were on that side. But that were critical of it was powerful institutions in their own right. Academia, young people, entertainers. And so you had these countervailing forces. But what happens if you could get those institutions, academia, entertainment, all of a sudden on the same side is the pro-Vietnam people? Then what happens, right? Well, you still need a boogeyman. Who's the boogeyman? What's the populist right? It's those people in rural America, those 10-tooth rubes that are racist, that hate Barack Obama because he's a black man. And to me, one of the most impressive propaganda victories in the history of the world was, I already kind of mentioned this, the people I marched with when George Bush was president, where I was this crazy Ron Paul libertarian. So my lefty friends liked me because I was against the Iraq War, I was against the Patriot Act. All of a sudden, they're not just indifferent to the military-industrial complex and the police state. They are the biggest supporters. Like, literally the biggest supporters. And to the point where now, like, they're seriously like, yay, Dick Cheney. Yay, Alberto Gonzalez is on our side. And it's like, you do have to tip your cap at, like, my goodness, the propaganda victory to totally inundate that side and be able to get that side of your most staunch enemies that are now your most staunch allies. And so who's left to challenge? It's the populist right. The populist left is success. They exist. People like Jimmy Dore exist. But the problem is they are defeated within their own side. So the DNC can crush Bernie Sanders. It could crush any hopes of a real AOC or someone like that. And by the way, these aren't politicians I particularly like their ideologies, but they're against the orthodoxy of the establishment party. On the right was winning. The right won Brexit. The right won with Donald Trump. The right won with Marine Le Pen and all of these populists. And so what happened is those institutions are now all in against the populist right.
Well,
and it's not that...
France is the better example of that.
Yeah.
Where Macron was so desperate he threw his lot in with the hard left, and now it's like, well, what do we do? And there's a very weird détente right now there. But I think you're 100% right with that. It does create the issue of, well, what do we do here? Now, I think if there's a reversal of those things, you're going to see very much. It's easier to be populist when you're on the outside,
right,
of the levers of power. It's always very easy. I think probably one of the most successful populists of all time is Eugene Debs. Mm-hmm. He ran the socialist ticket in, the 1920 presidential election. Ran for prison, got 1 million votes.
Yep.
Not saying I like socialism.
Right.
Helicopters fuel themselves.
Right.
But there is the idea that if you are on the outside of that power and you're outside of controlling the institutions, well, yes, it's easier for the populism to bloom. When you're in it, you're focused on solidifying it, so there's the incentives of money and power. So there's a reason why Bernie, the millionaires and the billionaires. Well, Bernie now has 3 lake houses.
Right.
AOC is now, she's doing fine. So it's very easy to do that when you're in power. And if the right were in power, then the populism on the right would wane. So it's not. It's more of just the game in that regard. And I think it just takes time to change it back and forth.
I agree, but what I see is it's like the pendulum swings. But is the pendulum swinging further each time? And will we eventually get to a point?
Well,
so
that's
You know, and so like one of the things I see now, don't get me wrong, I am of the feeling that because of what I see as our establishment institutions, I don't even think they're left leaning. I think they just pay lip service to the causes of the left because they see benefit of having those allies right now. But that's so bad in many instances that I'm willing to take allies almost everywhere. Populist left wants to be my ally. I'll tip my cap to you, socialist, communist. I disagree with a lot of your ideology, but you're right. We need to out this corruption. Christian nationalist, paleocons, libertarians, all of these people that I'm like, yeah. But the truth is, I'm black-pilled to this extent. I think that ultimately I'll lose because what I want is cooler heads to prevail. I want to be a populist that operates like you just said, that would come into power and say, and I want to limit my own power because I understand the sort of intoxication of abusing this. But the counter I get from like such as the Christian nationalists, this is an argument I'm having with them recently, right? They'll be like, hey, we think that the establishment and the left, the progressive left, is indoctrinating our kids in school. We're fine with the ability of schools to indoctrinate. We just want to indoctrinate them to our Christian message. And so I'm trying to be like, well, no, I think schools should be math, science, history, right? I don't think it should be. And they're like, why? They don't care. They'll throw you in the gulag like anyone else. So we might as well take power and wield it. We might as well do to them what they desire to do to me. How do you tell them they're wrong? Like, it's so hard because they have a point,
Yeah. You can't. No, there is no. There is. It's well. I mean, the stone toss meme is very correct. It's like,
right.
Well, at least we took the high road. It's like,
right.
It's very correct. Yes. How do you? It's very much. As Achilles said, there is no accord. There's no accord between men and lions or wolves and sheep.
Yeah.
So how do you do that if you're the men and lion? There's no accord. There is no agreement. Well. How do you seek that agreement when, yes, as soon as you, it's oh God, what's like one of those, it's the game. As soon as you turn your back, the other guy's going to move, and as soon as he turns his back, you're going to move.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that is the. I don't know how you get around that. I really don't, and that's a very hard argument to. It's a very hard argument to.
For me, I think COVID was
a hard argument. It's a hard argument, but the thing I think at the end of the day though is. The cost of who you throw in with is still something you have to judge, like, because very much like with the French government, you throw your lot in with, who you might think is a communist. Okay. And, you throw your lot in with that person. Well, what do you do then?
Right.
Okay. We now got victory. Well, that guy's standing right there next to you. You got to do something with him now. So what do you do with that? And I think that's the very weird. That's the thing you have to be careful about. Is okay. Well, now you've what do you do with that guy? Okay. Well, yeah, I worked with the communist. Now what are you going to do with him?
It's
or are you yeah.
It's a weird paradox because it's like you almost have, if you're unwilling to take allies that are also disenfranchised, your chance of successfully changing something are near zero. Yes. But once you take those allies, it's like, okay, once you start to make inroads, they're going to want to take things in a vastly different direction than you. So now what do you do? Because if you break that alliance, then the inroads you've gained seemingly will be lost.
And this is where The Simpsons does such a great job. It's like when they got the Radioactive Man comic. What do you do when they all own it?
Yeah, right, yeah. But it is tough. Like, COVID for me was a big thing. I mean, now you can see, like, I do all these debates. I debate, like, I don't know if you know the streamer Destiny, and I debate a lot of...
I'm well aware.
Yeah, so I've debated Destiny over and over again. I defended Destiny after the first assassination attempt. I thought... I have a predisposition to wanting to like people even that I disagree with because I stream for my own entertainment. And it's not fun to me if I'm talking to you right now, Sean, and all of a sudden I think you're thinking like, I hope this guy goes to prison. I hope he dies. I'm not having fun anymore, right? Even if we're agreeing or disagreeing, I don't want to interact with people that I think secretly harbors or publicly harbors the worst of intentions for me. So I am biased to even those that massively disagree with me from saying they're not as bad as maybe it seems. So when Destiny comes out and I think spiraling from a bad news cycle and he's like, F around and fire, Corey Competore, ha, he's dead. And any Trump supporter that goes is effing around and finding out. And, for me, all of that, I'm like, bad jokes, I'm willing to let it slide. The one thing was he had a friend on that was a lawyer and the friend that said was like, hey man, but just between me and you didn't want that bullet to kill Trump, did you? And he said, I don't know what I could say on stream. I will say the worst.
Yeah.
What's that?
I mean, at that point, you could say, "I wish that would have happened."
I know, but I can understand for terms of service, maybe sketchy.
Okay.
But then he says, well, the worst thing that could have happened was for him to shoot and miss, because that would give Trump some momentum. And that stuff's borderline for me if I would accept still talking. But when I've defended it, I still talk to Destiny and I defended it. But then when you see polling that comes out and it's like, granted, it's Rasmussen, so take it or leave it, and all individual polls could be wrong. But there's at least 2 polls now that are showing around a quarter of Democrats are like, yeah, we think Trump should have died. We think we'd have been better off if the assassin killed him. And then another 25% roughly is like, we're not sure. Like, how do you... It was the same with COVID, where you had 1/3 of Democrats polled said if you weren't vaccinated, they should take your kid out of your house. How do you coexist with that? Like, it seems so extreme that you're like, that's beyond rational discourse at this point, you know?
Sure. Well, and I think that just comes down to when people are like, oh, I wish that would have happened. You see this on people who think, like, I want a civil war, and they want it one way or another. You know, one side or the other of it. And there's this picture I've shown before when people talk about it. It's somewhere, I think, in Croatia, or it's somewhere in the Balkans, somewhere in the artist formerly known as Yugoslavia.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember where. And it's a guy standing there with fatigues and an AK, and he's soccer kicking the shit out of a guy laying on the ground. You know, everybody thinks they're going to be that guy running around holding a gun. You're more likely going to be that guy laying on the ground getting your fucking ribs kicked in. So everybody, you know, people like, oh, I wish that bullet would have killed Trump. Do you realize how bad that would have happened? Like, because you know what? You know how many people, like, you take like 10, 15 people say, fuck it, I'm going to go air condition the local Democratic Party office one night. Oh, well, I guess that's the game we're playing. Like, the amount of political violence is like, oh, well, the guy said he was a Trump supporter or he was a Republican. And I'm like, okay, fine, then it'll be rhino season, whatever it was going to be. No, you don't want that. You know, the idea of like, oh, I wish I would have killed him. It's like, no, you don't really want that. You think you want that. It sounds funny and edgy, but the blood in the streets is bad.
Yeah.
That's not something, you know, I don't want to have to go outside and gun down my neighbors.
Right.
Or, turn into the warlord of a cul-de-sac. That's never a good idea.
And it's one of these things, like, this is true on
Walking Dead looks like it really fucking sucks.
Right. This is true on both sides, but I, just in nature of who I debate a lot, I've seen this more on the left. There's this sort of like, look, me and you talked a lot today about problems we see with the current system, with our law system, etc. I think things are bad, and I think it's important to vote, and I have my reasons to vote for the side that I'm voting for. I'm completely authentic about that. But things could always get way worse, right? And I remember one time I was debating this communist, and he told me with a straight face. No, it was, I can't remember. It might have been Sock Dumb Left, which I guess is a socialist. But whoever it was on a panel. And I was like, well, can you at least agree that, you know, you're talking about how bad capitalism is today in the United States, that certainly we're pretty lucky to live in today's day and age, right? Like, when it comes to the entirety of human history, there's a lot of times and locations you could point to where things were way worse than they are current day United States. And this dude with a straight face looked at me and goes, that's not true. This is the worst that it's ever been in human, not joking. And I'm just like, you are so far out of touch with reality. Like, you could literally thumb through a world history book and every other page come to like some horrendous, you know, human-made or environmental-made catastrophe.
Well, and even that. Yeah. Well, it's even better with somebody like that because, I'm a big fat guy right now. But before, in previous years, you know, I've spent summers laying asphalt, laying concrete. You know, like this guy saying, oh, this is the worst time ever. Go fucking lay concrete all summer.
Right, 20 years ago.
You could be like, it's like, go lay concrete for a summer. I'm sure you'd be like, wow, this actually isn't too bad hanging around like this. Like, it doesn't, you know, when people say that, it's like, well, this is so horrible. I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind? This is amazing.
That's right. For me,
it's 9:00 on a Saturday night. I didn't spend all day, you know, working myself to death. I've got a fan running.
There's electricity. Yep.
Yeah, there's electricity. I can use a toilet later. I don't have to, like, my window's open.
Yep.
I think my front door is, well, it's locked, but, you know, like, the screen's open. Like, I do have guns sitting next to me, but that's all, regardless. But I'm not worried, like, tonight, like somebody's gonna come, like try to roll my house
Right.
intentionally. Like life is good at
And
the
so
end of the day.
it's flippant. It's one thing to say, I think a civil war would happen. That's one thing. But the people that are wishing for it, or the people that are wishing that Trump would have been shot, or the people that are wishing the government would have came in and taken children because their parents weren't vaccinated, like, I don't think that, like, to me, it's almost like it's like video game syndrome or comic book syndrome. Like, you're looking at it with, like, you're going to be this main character and things are going to work out for you. It's not. Like, that's taking things into direction. And that's why for me, particularly after the first assassination attempt, look, I'm a smallish streamer. I might have, 200 people watch me on a good live stream. I'm probably not going to move the needle on the election. Like, it's not like, shit, if I would have done one more pro-Trump stream, Trump would have won Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and would have won. But one thing I thought I could do, because I do have connections with bigger streamers that were saying some pretty borderline shit, was like, well, maybe I could talk to them. And maybe I could just be like, just think about this for a second. Just a second. Like, you don't have to hate me. You could think my positions are shit. You could even think I'm corrupt. But don't hate me or other people to the level where you're like, maybe it's time that they get assassinated or the person they're supporting is getting assassinated. And I have to say, even in this space, I was shocked at how much pushback I got. Like, for me, it was like this. Look, for us to have a conversation, we have to have a bare minimum where we can start. Not cheering for the assassination of the other side will be my beginning. Can we agree with that? And I can't tell you how many, and I'm like, what do you mean, well?
And I promised to keep the chart of where helicopter fuel pays for itself put away.
Yeah, right.
I won't sit here while you're talking and start flipping through the manual of a Huey helicopter and how to start it up. Yeah, I agree. Like, we can have that agreement.
It's a precursor, and I used to talk about this in debate all the time. If you don't have a precursor, like, implicate or a set of rules for, like, rules of engagement in dialogue, then dialogue's impossible. And if dialogue's impossible, communication still happens, and the way it's going to happen is ultimately through violence. And so we can't have radical changes that are coming through assassination. Now listen, anything bad could happen, and I don't blame. You're some Biden supporter out there, you're a Harris supporter, Trump gets assassinated. I'm not asking you to be like, oh my goodness, this is the worst day in my life. I'm not saying that, but you shouldn't be actively hoping, like, I hope this happens. It would be so much better for the country. And I just don't know. I don't know where we go. Hopefully we live long enough and Trump lives long enough that 20 years from now, there'll be, some right-wing guy running and Donald Trump will all of a sudden back the Democrat and they'll say, Trump's not that bad of a guy, just like Dick Cheney. Just like Dick Cheney was that. Hey, look, Trump's on our side. He's not that bad of a guy.
John McCain's not Hitler anymore. I mean, remember when John McCain was running, Family Guy did an episode where the SS were wearing a McCain Palin pin.
It's absolutely.
Mitt Romney was Hitler. George Bush was, remember the MoveOn.org did that well, I don't know, for those of you out there who might be a little younger, there was the original pack, and I call them the granddaddy of them all. They're not the original, but they were a big one. MoveOn.org, and it was moving on from the Clintons. Don't worry about that crap anymore. God, how wrong were we to move on from that?
Yep. Crazy, right?
But
yeah.
they did one where, like, Hitler's and he's doing his thing, and they slowly morph it. And it's funny when you watch it, you're like, this isn't bad CGI work for 2004 or 2003 at the time. You're like, that's pretty good. And they morph him into Bush.
Yep, I remember it.
And
yep.
Yeah, you're like, okay, well, Bush is Hitler, and I'm like, okay, he's Hitler. Well, McCain's now Hitler, and it's like, well, now Romney was Hitler, and now Trump is interdimensional triple Hitler. Like,
and where can you go from there? And that's what I tell. Like, there's a lot of never Trump Republicans that are like, well, and keep in mind, my first choice was Vivek. Then I wanted DeSantis. I thought both would have been better than Trump. But particularly a lot of never Trump DeSantis now that fans that'll be like, if it was DeSantis, things would be different. He wouldn't be getting blown out. I was like, no, there's no way. They're not going to be like, it's not like the Democrats' attacks on DeSantis are going to be like, well, at least he's not Trump. Trump was this evil Hitlerian type guy, but DeSantis is, we disagree with his policies, but at least he's a human being. No, it would have been, oh, he's Hitler in an even smoother package. He doesn't come across as loathsome, and he packages it like he's a polite Christian man, but he's even worse because of that. And there's nowhere to go. Once that's your argument, you can't then, it's not like, Kamala wins, and then Trump doesn't run in 2028, and so now Kamala in 2028 is running against J.D. Vance. It's not going to be like, well, okay, like the old days. This is, Reagan versus Dukakis or whatever. Like, no, That until something radically changes, you're just going to keep upping the intensity. And I don't know. I think that even if it's not Trump, I think that we're seeing, and I do think there's still a good chance that he gets taken out before the election. But even if not him, I mean, would anyone willing to bet, put money on the fact that within the next 20 years we're not going to see a presidential candidate assassinated? Anyone taking that bet? Because I think I would say the chances are above 80%. Because I don't know where we go. It's just, and by the way, the counter is going to be true as well. The Democrats the right's going to start. It's not just going to be you're a communist. It's you're a communist that wants to throw us all in the gulag, and you're cheering for the assassin, and you want to take away our children. And some of these things could be. That's what I tell my friends on the left. It's like, maybe you really think Trump is a Nazi. You should be allowed to say it, but you should be hedging that by saying, like, look, but we have to deal with this through official channels. You can't deal with it through like assassination attempts.
Well, I mean, here I say it like this: if you really think Trump is Hitler, there's only one. Hitler, they didn't stop Hitler with mean tweets. Like, Hitler had to get dealt with. Yeah. So if you're really going to run around, like other people, like, democracy's on the line. I'm like, so you're telling me right now, if Trump wins, you're going to be stashing weapons, ammo, and learning how to fight. Well, no, I'll just be on Twitter here bitching and crying. I'm like, well, then it's really not that. It's not the end of the world.
That's absolutely true.
Because the fact you're not doing that in preparation for, well, he might win, so I'm stashing weapons, developing a network, learning how to make, spicy things that are energetic. I'm not learning how to do all that stuff. Or like one of the books back here might talk about doing urban target shooting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you're not doing that, then are you really that worried? No, this is just people being spazzes.
It's performative, but the problem is there are people on the fringe that don't understand that performative nature. And so, like, for example, if you're Joe Biden and you truly believe that Trump's this horrible threat to democracy, do you call him after the assassination attempt? Because Trump said, hey, we had a very good call. By the way, I believe that call happened. I believe Biden doesn't want Trump assassinated. I believe that, right? And so, but why, if he's Hitler, would you believe, would you do that?
Why would you call Hitler? Why would you call Hitler to check on Hitler?
Right.
Why would you do that? If FDR had heard Hitler fell down skiing, would you get a telegram saying, "Oh, dear 80, I hope you're all right, signed Frank"?
But the guy on Reddit that's watching their favorite streamer, and I see this. I go to some people send me these Reddit posts like, "Here's this streamer you debated. Look at their Reddit," and it's saying stuff like this. Well, the Supreme Court's corrupt, and they granted Trump total immunity, so he's basically a god emperor. We tried to take the legal venue, and it didn't work. So. Right.
To be fair, going to the Trump immunity thing, to be fair, the president has pretty much always been immune.
Right.
The president threw people in fucking concentration camps.
Yep.
Nobody got in trouble for that. The president has murdered people with a drone. Nobody cared about that. The president has done all kinds of things that have been questionable, and nobody cared about it. Nobody stopped it. The president operates as a 4-year king. I mean, it's not a ridiculous statement. I mean, there's the idea of the administrative state as being the fourth branch of government. Yeah, and it's controlled by the president.
Right.
He sets policy and dictates it. So this idea of like we're in uncharted territory, no, it's just we're formally now acknowledging this has been the way it's been.
Yeah, and there are slight problems I have with that court case. Like, it's difficult. I don't really understand exactly where they're getting the idea of what an official duty is. Such as if they just say, well, because the head of the executive, the president, is tasked with enforcing laws, so therefore any conversation with his attorney general's official business, it's like, then because the argument that people are making is, well, then he's also tasked with protecting us, right? So if he assassinates his opponent and says, well, I thought he was a terrorist, isn't that an official act? I think the answer to this, I don't know what the term is, but I believe the answer to that is, although you might be right that it's not clear in this court decision, we all know what would happen. They would bend the rules to be like, yeah, Trump, you can't assassinate your opponent. They would find a way to say, yeah, you can't get away with that. Yeah.
Well, even if they did impeachment, that's the option you go from there. That is always the political tool available.
Right.
It's fine. Okay, well, if he's got the immunity, you can remove him. But it's the idea about the acts, you see it in the superseding indictment for Trump. They removed all that stuff where he talked to the attorney general. And there was that whole almost like Saturday night, the Saturday Night Massacre 2.0 again about to happen, where Jeffrey Clark was involved in all that. Right. They removed a lot of that from the indictment because even the DOJ is like, okay, fine, fuck it. we'll remove it. We're going to focus on him as candidate Trump and all the things that occurred because most of it occurred beforehand. And I know Pisco thinks that, like, because he commented in one of my streams about what's going to happen in New York. I still think the New York conviction stands because a lot of all this stuff happened prior to Trump becoming president. Right. Yeah, the actual official payment happened in there, but I think, I just think it's probably going to be there. So
I think that there's a chance that if it gets overturned, I don't think it'll be because of that decision. I think that there will.
No, I think the bigger issue is the underlying felony that supported all of it.
Correct.
Never got introduced till the state's rebuttal case, which denied Trump the ability to have a fair trial because he couldn't prepare for it because he's done.
Yes.
So we'll see though what happens there.
Yeah.
I still don't. I mean, that becomes the issue of what like Judge Brashan's going to do. He's postponing till after the election. I could see him just saying YOLO and putting him in Rikers Island. Although, maybe that'll get people to want to get Rikers Island fixed because that is a hellhole unto itself.
Well, I know we probably both have to get going here, but I will say this: it was something I was going to ask you about. And one of the things that I've talked about a long time is I don't mind edgy jokes. I really don't. Like you want to tell, I've told some edgy ass jokes myself. But so it's not the joke I'm complaining about. I just want to make that clear to anyone listening. But the fact that the reality of our prison system is such that prison rape is such a prevalent joke, it's fucking appalling. Like, it is appalling that that's the condition of our prison system, in my opinion. And I was wondering if you had thoughts as a defense attorney, where it's like, look, I'm all for, hell, even if you want to increase what the penalties are for things and years served and stuff like that, but it should not be torture. You shouldn't be in there fighting for your life, every day where things like rape is so prevalent. I think we could do better as a society, right?
Yes. I mean, yes, jail should really suck.
Right.
But it shouldn't be a gladiator academy where you have to fight to survive, or you have to join a gang and now you're part of organized crime. And now we want to rehabilitate you, but we're making you, ride in the car with the Aryan Brotherhood or the gangster disciples or whoever it is to survive. And then when you get out, we're shocked that you're acting like a member of the Aryan Brotherhood or the gangster disciples when you get out. And you're like, oh, who could have foreseen this? But that's the issue. People like to say they want to, think about when people vote for judge. Well, I'm gonna be fair in sentencing and put a lot of people on probation. I'm gonna send those goddamn criminals to prison. Who wins?
Mm-hmm. The prison.
And then the politician says we're gonna make more laws and put more people in prison. Cool. Everybody likes that till they see how much it costs, and then they're like, "Well, skip on the budget. We don't need that many guards, or we don't need that many programs." There. So, and I will say though, I know people have asked me about things, and I've commented on this, and I don't know if you have the Trump case in Georgia. If you want to see a preview of how that case is going to unfold, watch the YSL trial that's been going on, the RICO case with the gangster or the alleged gangsters who are, rappers. They're not gangsters. That's a preview of how the Trump case is going to proceed once it gets going.
Yeah, maybe when we get closer to it, if you don't mind, I'll talk to you about it. But yeah.
Google the Young Thug trial and you'll see how bad it is. And that's a preview of what's going to happen.
Yeah, there's been some... And again, I'm someone who's a layman watching, but even me, I'm watching some of this like, it's... Ugh, man. But, well, hey, go ahead, please.
The last one I was going to say is the case down in the Mar-a-Lago case, that's coming back. The 11th Circuit is going to reverse that, and then Judge Cannon's going to have to re-deal with the case.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that.
That one's not going to survive.
Yeah, I agree. So, I really appreciate you coming on. Like, I thought it was a lot of fun. I'd be happy if you ever want me to come on your show or if you, any topic or anytime you don't talk. I thought it was a lot of fun. Can you tell my audience where to find you? Like what times you would be live or when you'd prefer that people check you out?
Yeah, sure. So you guys can find me over on YouTube at Potentially Criminal. You can find me on Twitter at LawTubeSean. There's a whole reason why I have that instead of Potentially Criminal, and that's because I went to the gulag for a while. So that's where you can find me there. I do a weekly show every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern Time, the only time zone that matters. And we talk about all kinds of fun stuff. A little bit later tonight, we're probably going to be going over this Sarah Boone had a pretrial. She's a woman who helped zip up her boyfriend in a suitcase, and he suffocated, and she watched him die.
I saw that. I saw the video of that, yeah.
Yeah, she's fighting her trial right now. We're gonna probably look at that tonight, and then, actually, I'm not sure what we're gonna be doing tomorrow, but we might do something. But yeah, guys, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Twitch, for the two people that watch on Twitch. So
me too. That's where I'm at.
And on Rumble.
Well, hey, man, thanks. I appreciate it. I'll make sure I get those links before I close down my show. I'll stream for like another half hour or so, but hopefully people jump on over there to watch you live tonight. But really appreciate it. Anything I could ever do for you, let me know. And I really, really thank you for coming. It was a lot of fun tonight.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on. See you, man.
Take it easy, Sean.
Sure. Bye.
All right. Good stuff. That was fun. Okay, 1 second, and I'll get back to you all. So I have this theory where everything that I ever DM someone or anything like that, text message, email, DM, will inevitably be leaked because I am distrusting as a general of people, right? But the other reason is, did you ever notice when I'm switching, like I shut my camera off there, all of a sudden, boop, there's my DM screen, or on X all the time, I'll accidentally bring up my DM screen. So it's very easy for me already operating under the auspices. I'd probably leak my own stuff, so there's never anything shady that's going on there. Sean, great, man. That was my first time interacting with him. I had a lot of fun, man. And I know it took the form more of an interview of me asking him questions and then sort of weighing in with my thoughts than I thought it may have, but that was okay. I thought it went great. And like I said, I wouldn't mind leaving him run the conversation at some point. But a lot of fun, man. I really enjoyed talking. And I think there's a lot of insight as someone who's like talks a lot about these legal cases. Talks about these legal cases and things of that nature, to talk to someone who's actually on the ground, like being an attorney every day. Other than Pisco, who's, I think horribly predisposed to being biased on this. So what are we up to? He didn't call me a Yinzer. I know he's from Ohio. We didn't get into that. If he's a Browns fan or... So let me link at least his YouTube link. And I know he's got all of his links that are attached there as well. So let me do that for you. And then I definitely want to make sure I get to the super chats, because I saw some people super chatting. Now I was trying my best to pay attention to make sure that the super chats weren't questions directed at Sean. I was trying to get to those. So I saw most of the super chats were of that nature. Let me do that for you. So let me read them now. Weld QC John for $5 says, Rob, would Andrew and the Crucible crew rather go to war with 100 Hannah Barons or 100 Destinies? I'd be interested in what that answer is. It would be interesting to hear what they specifically said, but my guess is the general will be, you shouldn't judge based on the exception. If you drafted men, you would get enough 100 men that are physically more capable than Hannah Barons, so we wouldn't need the Destinies, would probably be what they'd say. Wicked Wally for $5 says, after the stream, Sean will return to his original future timeline as Old Man Rob. Yeah, man, I wanted to say to him, like, it's rare. Like, I used to have a really majestic beard. Now I just got this old shabby bitch. But, like, dude, Sean's beard is top notch. That's good stuff, man. John Rock for $2 says, where do we donate directly to? YouTube. You can. I think someone sent you the link, but I'll put the link. Probably the best place to donate to me is PayPal. I probably get the highest percentage of money there. So you can see that the PayPal link's there in addition to all of my other links at places you can find me. So Patreon I don't use much anymore, but D Golog for $2 says, Sean needs to do a Stoney's Pub ad read. Yeah, I should have. I know people ask me about that. I should have said that. I'm sorry about that, D-Golog. D-Golog for another $2 says, Sean and Rob together, awesome. Thank you. I agree. I thought it was a lot of fun. IntQ Tips for $5 says, DMX song Damien specifically tells you what's going on, at least with him, during his time in the industry. And that's talking about the Diddy stuff. Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a lot of lyrics and stuff that, it's crazy. Vita for $2 says, why would Biden put on a MAGA hat if Trump was Hitler? Exactly. That's what we're talking about. A lot of them don't believe this rhetoric, but they understand that it's politically persuasive to them. Now, I do think there are people in the administrative state. It's not that they think Trump's Hitler, but they think he's a unique threat to them. And maybe those people would be more willing to do the worst of things. But I don't think it's Biden. I don't. I know that they know he's not Hitler. The problem, though, is the people that hear that and believe it. So that's, But no, it was a lot of fun. And I really thank him for coming on. I got some other potential guests coming soon. Again, I want to put his YouTube channel out, and I think he's going to be live streaming here later. So if you're interested, after I'm going to be done here soon. You can go check out Potentially Criminal. I'm aware of the case that he's talking about. I didn't know the woman, but I've seen, she, like, they're playing a game or whatever, and she puts her husband in this suitcase, and he's begging her, like, please leave me out. And she doesn't, and he ends up suffocating. Yeah, Roar, that's what I was asking. Hopefully, maybe next week at some point on stream, maybe Wednesday or something, we'll review the Viva Fry Pisco interaction. Maybe we'll do that. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to watch. I was doing my orthopedic business today for my back, so I was at a specialist most of the day today, and I was like, oh shit, looks like Viva's talking to Pisco. So I caught like 3 minutes of it, but I was didn't get to see much of it. But I was inquiring. A lot of people reached out to me and said they thought Viva Fry did very good, which is good. Why is that still up? We don't need that. Am I missing anything? Anything I need to respond to? So it's about 10 o'clock. Well, I'm getting out of here early tonight, huh? So yeah, we'll go over that, and I'll give the best of my opinions on that. Viva Fry. I would love to talk to Viva Fry. I think that'd be great. I always wanted to talk to him and Robert Barnes. I thought that would be fantastic. Of course, I'm selfish, so I always like talking to people that are good, and I like talking to people that have bigger audience because I want more eyeballs on me. So, but I thought Sean that I just talked to there is phenomenal. I was watching his videos today and yesterday, and I'm very impressed. I think he's a good streamer too, because not only is he smart and informative, but I think he's funny and he's entertaining to listen to, which is what you want. It's not enough to just be like stoically really smart or really good at your points. You want someone that kind of entertains you too, and I think he definitely has that. Made it smooth to talk to him. And, we've never even met each other until right then when you saw us come on, and I think the conversation went pretty smooth. It didn't feel like pulling hairs or anything, Oh, yeah, Roar? A lot of people told him through Super Chat to talk to me. Good deal, yeah. What's up, Armaz? Hi, how you doing? Yeah, I hope Viva reaches out as well. It's one of those deals where I don't really have connections to many people, but we'll do our best. I'll contact my boy Black Elk. I know he's been reaching out to a lot of people, so I'll make sure. I'm sure he's reached out to Viva. Thanks. Yeah, thank you everyone that was in the chat recommending me. Thank you, Chris, for letting me know. I appreciate that. But I'd love to talk to Viva. I don't think that I have as strong as a legal backing as someone like Potentially Criminal or Viva or Robert Barnes, but I think that I'm able to sort of give a big picture analysis of the corruption that's going on, things of that nature. So, all right, let's go on Twitch, raid someone, since I could still do that. And then I'm I gotta tell you, I'm tired, man. I was up early today, a little worried about this orthopedic business, so I'm glad it went pretty good. So get some sleep tonight. Let's raid if you're feeling adventurous. Good guy, him and his wife. I think you guys will enjoy him. Now, I do recommend, though, check out if you're feeling adventurous. In a little bit here, remember, Potentially Criminal over on YouTube. He'll be streaming over there. So check that out if you're not doing anything the rest of the night. Thank you, everyone, for your financial support. It's incredibly appreciated. Thank you for those that engage in the chat. It means a lot. I do apologize when it comes to the chat. Oftentimes, if I have a guest or I'm doing a debate, it's harder to get to the chat, but I think people understand that. And then, even the people that don't chat, I do really appreciate it. Even if you don't agree with me, it's nice to know that there are people. It's humbling to know that there's people out there listening to me, so I really appreciated it. So, shit it in your hands and clap. Great, good stuff. I swear I saw, I did. I debated Destiny years ago. I've debated Destiny probably 12, 14 times. So, but yeah, enjoyed the conversation today. Yeah, I'll feel better. Thanks, David Atlas. I appreciate it. Enjoy this raid. And as always, everyone, have a good one.